We accept the reality of the world with which we're presented. It's as simple as that.
We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies, Mr. Beale. The world is a business, Mr. Beale.
Go on without me. Just go.
A good soldier never leaves a man behind.
Because I wouldn't give you 2 cents for all your fancy rules if behind them they didn't have a little bit of plain, ordinary, everyday kindness.
Life, finds a way.
Welcome to Silver Screen Biases, where we dig into a critically acclaimed movie and evaluate the truth claims within it. I'm Nelson.
This is Jeff.
And this week we have with us...
I'm Connor.
Thank you for coming, Connor.
Yes, welcome.
So for some context, Connor and I go...
Connor text?
Some Connor text. Connor and I go way back. We are friends since high school, and we have Connor on to talk with us about a very sensitive topic that I'm very passionate about. Connor is currently tell us, what is your role?
So I am a sergeant in the U.S. Army. I'm a combat medic stationed at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, at least for another month, and then I'm moving to Fort Carson, Colorado.
And when Connor first decided to enlist, he and our third musketeer avoided telling me until like the weekend before you left.
I did do that.
Because they were scared that I would be upset.
Were you upset?
Upset's not the right word for it. It's like, okay. I think that what Connor does is an incredibly valuable thing, something that most people aren't willing or able to do, and a thing that would exist even if there wasn't a government, right? There's always going to be private defense contractors, right, and they're always going to want medics. I just don't like who he does it for. And for reasons that I think are very understandable, Connor's not going to comment.
Yeah.
I am not. I have no comment on government issues.
Current government
issues.
That's right. All right. And Jeff, what movie are we covering this week?
We are reunited with Stanley Kubrick today.
That's right.
We watched Full Metal Jacket, 1987.
First impressions.
Better than Clockwork Orange.
I'm going to cut you off right there because before we get into that, we just wanted to take a moment to thank our
Tuttle
Were you looking for a sponsor?
That's the one. Thank you, Connor. Our sponsor, Tuttle Twins. Specifically, this week I want to highlight their book, Golden Rule. I think it's a really great book that has a lot to do with what we're going to be talking about today. In that book, in the Golden Rule, they learn a valuable lesson. The way to peace is for blowback to cease. As the great Ron Paul said in his 2012 presidential nomination run, they don't come over here because we wear blue jeans. They come over here because we're over there.
Profound.
Yeah, so check out Tuttle Twins in the link below. If you purchase anything after clicking through that link, we will get a cut of that. It doesn't increase or decrease your price, but it tells them that we sent you, and we appreciate your support in that way. Now, Jeff, back to you. Tell us, what was your first impression of this movie?
So I was hesitant going into it, knowing how, if you've listened to the previous episode, I'm not a fan of Clockwork Orange.
Really? It's never come up.
It's never. Yeah. Not well. Maybe it has. But so I was a little hesitant. I was like, okay, I didn't know what to expect. I knew it was military. I knew like it was a completely different, essentially category of film. Like it was. So like I was open minded about it. But like I ended up not hating it. There were some parts in it which we'll get into talk about later that was still had that iconic Stanley Kubrick darkness to it.
Sure.
That I've seen. I wouldn't say a lot. I've seen, for me, a handful of military-based movies and stuff, and some that I enjoy and some that I would go back and watch again. Others that I would be like, that was good, that was too much, and one's enough. Like so this one was one of those one's enough type of thing.
Right.
For mostly because of some of the darkness and some of those dark moments, and just and again we'll get to that moment later. But overall, I liked it better than Clockwork Orange, and it exceeded expectations just because of what I was going into. If that makes sense.
Sure.
Yeah.
Was this your first time seeing it?
Absolutely.
Connor? Was this your first time seeing it?
Absolutely not. I've seen it probably 2 or 3 times before.
Okay.
And I'm not sure why, because I don't like this movie.
Okay.
Oh, really?
I don't.
Do you like Kubrick movies in general?
No. I
Okay.
think he's
You're at
one
the
of the
right
most
podcast.
overrated directors. Like, I understand Hollywood's perspective on him, right?
Mhm.
And that he revolutionized film and he pushed the boundaries and all this stuff. I just find his movies to be boring.
Oh.
Okay.
You would describe this movie as boring?
After the first 45 minutes, yes.
After boot camp.
Okay. I will say the first half of the movie was I was way more engripped. I don't know if that's the right word, but like
It's not, but I like it.
the first half was way more intriguing and more interesting than the second half. I would agree with that.
I think it's because the second half of the movie, there's no objective.
Right.
Like in the first half, they're trying to make it through boot camp, right?
Mhm.
And you're seeing, I mean, we can get into this later if you want.
No,
But you're seeing
go for it.
them lose their individuality to become part of the machine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in the second part, it's just kind of all over the place. They don't have an objective. There's no real plot. It's just them moving all over the place.
Just patched moments of their
Do you think that maybe that in itself is a criticism of the
war?
the futility of that war, and that it was an objectiveless war?
Yeah. I think that's exactly what he was going for. I just didn't find it entertaining.
Right. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Do you think that it's effective in communicating that?
I think to the layman, no.
Okay.
I'm not the kind of person that likes to watch a movie and analyze it.
Sure.
Maybe I'm a terrible guest for this podcast.
No, that's. I mean, you're about par for the course.
Yeah.
In fact, most of the hosts of the two of us, one and a half of us don't really do that.
Yep.
I like to watch movies to be entertained. So if I have to sit there and actually work to try and understand what the director's trying to say,
Sure.
I am just checked out at that point.
So you prefer your movies like the commercials in The Invention of Lying? Have you seen The Invention of Lying?
Nope.
I don't even know what that is.
Is that the... Oh, what is that?
Ricky Gervais did a
Yeah,
movie
him.
called The Invention of Lying.
Okay.
He lives in a world where lying doesn't exist.
Oh.
And by some sheer happenstance, he's the first person to figure it out. Okay?
Okay, I'm intrigued.
I have seen clips from this on the Chinese spy app TikTok.
Oh, nice.
Does it kind of go in line with essentially
You're not allowed to have that.
I am allowed to have that.
Are you?
Yep.
Huh.
Most soldiers do have that.
I knew that, but like I know that not being allowed to doesn't really stop you. I just thought that you guys weren't allowed to have that.
Is it similar to like Yes Man with Jim Carrey? Like that whole like people living within one specific like rule? Like is there similarities to that or
There is some bleed over between the
Okay.
two. But specifically, the reason I brought it up is because in The Invention of Lying, there's an advertisement for Coca-Cola. And it says, "Hi, I'm Tom from Coca-Cola. You know Coca-Cola. You love Coca-Cola. You've had a lot of Coca-Cola. And I'm here to ask you to please keep buying Coca-Cola." And that's the commercial. And then later, a bus drives by with a Pepsi ad that says, "Pepsi, when they don't have Coke." So I was joking. Connor prefers his movies like
you've sold me
commercials.
on this movie.
They just need to
Anything
be-
pro Coke is good. Coca-Cola. I
big
should
fan
say.
of Coke.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
That's what keeps you going, huh?
Yeah. And it's out of your system in 2 days.
A little bit of booger sugar.
Yeah. Wait a second.
That's illegal. So you think that the movie is too cryptic in its message?
Yes.
Okay. What are some of the more cryptic messages in this movie that you think would get missed on a first pass through?
I think the biggest one is the loss of individuality.
Mm.
I think they show that really well in boot camp. And then
Yeah.
when you get to the war itself,
It's
you're
much
following-
subtler.
You're following Joker around, and he hasn't lost his individuality, which is why they call him Joker.
Right.
But I think that that's the main theme of the movie, and I think that that goes over people's heads. I think most people look at this movie and they see it as a commentary on the duality of man.
Okay.
And
Which they say flat out in the movie.
Right. When the Colonel's or asking Joker questions, and he's commenting on why he has his peace button and Born to Kill on his helmet.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But I don't think that that's what the movie's about.
You think that was a misdirect, and that with that line, Kubrick's basically mocking the audience
Maybe a little.
or taunting the audience?
Maybe a little.
Bait and switch type of thing.
We've gotten into the weeds a little early, and Jeff, I apologize. There's
No need to apologize.
important production information that we handle up
Yes,
top,
it's
and,
all right.
and I want to get to that.
All right. So Like I said, Full Metal Jacket.
We'll be back to that, Connor. Hold that thought.
1987. This movie was filmed. It took over a year to film it, so it's probably started production around 1985, around there. I found a statement that said that there was a person who got married, conceived a child, and had that child within the production of this movie.
And divorced that child.
Well, that it didn't go into that, but the production of this movie took time. But yeah, it came out in 1987. A runtime of
18 months isn't a whole lot of time for a movie.
Well, I mean, that fact makes it sound like it's long. Married, conceived. I mean, could have been a shotgun wedding too. I don't know.
Sure.
It didn't say what character either. So, but hour and 56 minutes is the runtime. It is rated R. Notable cast. The only cast that I recognize, and maybe you guys are familiar with any of the other ones, is Vincent D'Onofrio.
Yeah.
That's the only one that I recognized.
Joker is Matthew Modine. He's the doctor in Stranger Things. He's Papa.
Is that who that is?
That's who that is.
The Doctor and Strange.
So there's like three.
Oh my goodness!
There's three actors in this movie that have like made a name for themselves after the movie.
Why?
Vincent D'Onofrio's one.
Yes.
Alex Baldwin, who's not a Baldwin brother. That's Animal Mother. He's in Chuck.
Adam
in
Baldwin.
He's in a bunch of stuff that I know you haven't seen, Jeff.
Adam Baldwin.
Yeah, Adam Baldwin. No, Alec Baldwin.
No, it's Adam.
It's
I'm
Adam.
looking at it right now.
Alec Baldwin's the guy who doesn't.
Alec Baldwin is one of the Baldwin brothers. Yeah.
Adam Baldwin is in this movie.
Yeah. You're right.
Animal Mother.
So Adam Baldwin is main cast in Firefly, which you haven't seen,
I've not seen that.
and in Chuck, which you haven't seen.
I have not seen Chuck.
But that's what I know him from. But if you pull
Okay.
him up on IMDb, that's not in his like. This is what he's known for.
Right.
And you said that Joker is
That's Matthew Modine. He's Papa in Stranger Things.
is Matthew Modine the actor's name
Yes,
or Papa in Stranger Things?
that's the actor's name.
That's fascinating.
And there's another breakout actor from this whose name I didn't recognize, and none of the productions that he's associated with I recognized.
It's kind of vague.
Yeah. 1 second, let me pull that up.
Cool fact, Nels.
Yeah. I'm really good at this, guys. What's the name of this movie? Full Metal Jacket. Oh, man. I'm in such a brain fog. I have such a brain fog from this head cold. I don't know if you've noticed, Connor, but in the last, 3 months of episodes, I'm coughing in the background constantly. I've edited out a ton of them, but, I can't get them all.
I hadn't noticed. I was actually just really distracted by your audio quality in that
The Doc Dixon
Prestige
episode.
episode.
Oh man, I did everything I could to clean that up, and it
It was
just was so bad. Arliss Howard, Private Cowboy, had a prestigious career after this. I don't recognize the name. I don't really know the stuff he's been in. The other
Can
person,
you call that prestigious then?
I don't know, but a successful career. He was in Tequila Sunrise, Jurassic Park, Lost World, Time Traveler's Wife, Moneyball,
Oh, okay. So some
Mank. I've never
some
heard of Mank.
prominent movies, just
Yeah.
not a prominent character. in
Not
the movie.
a well-known name. And then Connor, I know you know some stuff on this, and Jeff, you may have seen it in your pre-show preparation. R. Lee Ermey.
I was going to ask if you guys had recognized him at all.
Arlie.
Because he's the one that I
not.
knew first.
Yeah.
He used to do a show on History Channel about historical weapons, and I used to watch it as a kid.
I'm looking him up right now.
Well, this movie was his first role.
Right. He wasn't actually supposed to be an actor in it.
He
was-
This is the drill sergeant, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. He was there to. Well, sorry. I totally
you're
interrupted.
fine.
He was supposed to be there to instruct the person acting as the drill instructor. And Kubrick was like, "No, you're in. You do this way more natural because it's where he was. That's what he was."
And the guy who was
Yeah.
supposed to be the drill instructor,
Oh, I don't
he
know
got
this.
recast to be the guy in the helicopter that's shooting the civilians as they're flying in.
Oh.
That was one of the dark moments for me. That was
Really? You think that's dark when the
Yeah.
guy's shooting
That-
down?
that
I
was-
don't know. I
yeah.
disagree. It
Okay. This Arlie
was one of the most
Ermey.
lighthearted moments in the movie.
I watched this show. That's incredible. Yeah.
What's the
That's
name of the show?
It's History Channel. That's the channel. Shoot, what's the name of the show? I'm looking it up.
While you're talking about that,
Yes.
while you're looking that up, so
Yes.
Adam Baldwin's character in Firefly and Chuck are very similar characters.
Okay.
And very different from his character of Animal Mother. In Chuck and in Firefly, he is the weapon specialist in both, right? So he's got the big weapons and stuff like he does in this. But in this, he's much more outspoken. In the other two, he's much more the strong silent type. And so it was interesting for me seeing him in his first role being such a I thought he was a very likable character. a bit of a lunatic, but they all are in their own ways.
Yeah, I have a problem with that, but we can get into that later.
I look forward to it. Yeah.
So Mail Call,
Mail call. Okay.
2002 2007.
How is that
He was
spelled?
the host, MAILCALL, and then actually Lock and Load with R. Lee Ermey. TV series, 13 episodes. That was
His
a
name
miniseries.
sounds like it's an anagram or a fictitious name.
Yeah. And then Kubrick Remembered. He was in a documentary about that. And then he had another show for 31 episodes called Gunny Time with R. Lee Ermey. So he's and I know I recognize him on the earlier one.
Mail call was the one
Okay.
that I remember.
That's
people would write in questions about weapons from like throughout history, and he would go over the weapons and show them off and how they worked and what they were used for.
Was it scripted or is he just that good?
I'm sure parts of it.
It was direct. Yeah, I mean,
I didn't recognize him, but just now I pulled him up on IMDb, and him as an old man, I certainly recognize.
Yeah, he just passed away a couple years ago.
2018. Yep.
He was in 7, Mississippi Burning, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, none of which I've seen.
Also, fun fact about him: when he was in the Marine Corps, he made it, I believe, to staff sergeant, and in the movie, he's a gunnery sergeant.
Yeah,
because that's the senior drill instructor. And
does that mean he was promoted?
The Marine Corps actually promoted him after he got out because of his role in this movie. They said he did such a good job being a gunnery sergeant in this movie that they promoted him after he retired.
I find that shocking.
What?
And I'll get into why later, but I'm going to remember.
What did they have to gain by giving him a promotion post-employment or commitment to that role?
I don't think they gained anything.
Okay,
I think it was
like
just a symbolic thing for
PR
him.
thing.
Okay,
which is why after this movie, everybody just called him Gunny. That was his nickname.
Okay.
Until he died.
There you go.
Interesting.
That's fascinating. I'm glad you guys. I would never have known. Like I would not have. That's fun. 8.3 out of 10 on the IMDb ratings. As of recording this is 105 on the top 250. And the last facts here I got for you is on the Rotten Tomatoes, 91 tomato meter, 94 audience.
I think those are all. I think it's worth all those scores.
I agree. I
know, Connor, you disagree.
I don't necessarily disagree.
Okay, so you think it's a good movie, you just don't care for it.
It's not your preference.
Okay, that's fair.
So that's all the facts I've got. Well, and you've got the budget. Now.
That's right.
What was the budget?
So estimated budget, if you look it up, you're going to see two numbers, 17 million and 30 million. The discrepancy there is that typically the publicity budget. Thank you, man. That's why I keep you around, Jeff.
You looked at me. I'm not sure why.
I know. I should have looked at Jeff. The publicity budget is typically twice the budget of the production budget.
Mm-hmm.
So, 30 million is how much this movie cost for production and publicity. In today's money, that's $77 million, or 77.3-ish. Cumulative rate of inflation since 1987, 157%.
So there you go. And then the last thing we do before we get into the meat and bones of this is we ask our guest a couple questions. So Connor, we have 3 questions.
Just some light questions.
Super,
I've
just
heard.
chill. Yeah. So the first one is, what is your political bias? And this could be broad, vague, short, long. Take as much time as you want. But what is your political bias?
So I know Nelson is an anarcho-capitalist. I would say that I am more centrist, libertarian with a small L. I believe that government does have a role to play, but they should be small. That they should leave people to have their own freedoms and their own lives and stay out of them. But that government does have a key role to play in like foreign policy, and I believe defense. He doesn't. I know that. So I would say that that's kind of my political leanings.
Is that a position you came to largely before or after your experience in the military?
Mostly before.
Okay. Is that a political stance that you think is somewhat common in the military?
Yeah, I would say it's either that or leaning toward conservative. There's not a whole lot of... I mean, there are some liberal...
Dressed as dogs and stuff?
Oh, yeah, all the time. We actually have our own separate dog bathroom.
Is there a lot of furries in the military?
There was at least one, and he was discharged. after he was discharged.
You don't
I'm
have to
sure.
answer that.
Actually, if you identify as a dog in the military, they send you to
To
canine.
sniff out mines.
Yeah, exactly. You get assigned a handler. It's the fastest way to get a promotion. Fun fact about the military: the dogs are one rank higher than their handlers, so that it is a crime to abuse the dog.
Wow.
See, to me, it would seem much more sensible to just say, we have a rule that you don't abuse the dogs, rather than to promote the dogs. But I mean, like, I guess it has its own internal logic.
There are a lot of rules in the military that get broken on a daily basis.
For
let
sure.
me tell you.
Are you saying that everybody's abusing dogs?
No, I don't think anybody's
Nelson,
abusing
there's,
dogs.
there's our next podcast.
Dog abuse in the military, an investigation.
We do safety briefs every Friday that specifically say don't beat your dog. So
Wow.
So if we have to have it every Friday, it must be happening a lot.
there's a lot of things that they say in those safety briefs every Friday.
Okay. Say, was that it for the political topic?
Yeah.
Okay. The second question is,
Who'd
what's
you vote for?
the last 30 ballots? What was your?
Yeah.
What's your religious bias? What's where are you at currently when it comes to a religious perspective?
So for religion, I grew up going to church every Sunday. Currently, I haven't been to church in a long time.
Okay.
And it's not necessarily that I don't believe in something, but I'm definitely not like a practicing Christian or anything like that. I've got certain things that I have issues with organized religion.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And it applies to Christianity, Islam, all kinds of things.
How do you feel about unorganized religion?
I'm for it.
Yeah, okay. So you're pro-paganism, but against...
Chaotic
Exactly.
catharsis. Catharsis.
Okay.
We get into theological discussions actually all the time at work.
I can imagine.
I believe it. Yeah.
A job that...
And when you say work, you mean your military position, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I didn't know if you had another job, like if you work off. I don't know much about the military. I'm coming in pretty much blind.
For me,
mostly
work
volunteer.
work is 6:30 in the morning. I have to be there for PT.
Okay.
You get an hour and a half break after that for breakfast and to do hygiene, and then you have to be at work at 9:30.
Okay.
I'm at
You
work usually from 9:30 until anywhere from 3:30. I was going to say 15:30, but I don't want to confuse people. 3:30 to 5,
Okay.
and then I'm home for the day.
Right on.
And I don't think about work. I try not to think about work until I have to be back the next day. So
you're just one of us.
yep. And then weekends are off.
Right on.
Federal holidays, we normally get 4-day weekends, which is pretty great.
That's cool.
So
Okay.
So if you're a foreign nation intending to attack, aim for a weekend, about 5:30 on a Friday, and you'll have 3 days.
maybe we should cut this.
And this was our last episode of Silver Screen Bias. Okay, so yeah, have some issues with structured religion. Anything else that you would say it's kind of that's brought you to where you're at now with your perspective on?
Or pulled you away from
Yeah,
church.
correct. Yeah.
Things that have pulled me away from church.
Or brought you closer to it, or wherever. What's brought you to the position you have today? Like, I understand that you have issues with organized religion, and that's a somewhat common criticism. In fact, it's a criticism that Jeff and I also share.
Yes, absolutely, 100%.
So
Yes.
yeah, just if you don't mind, further refine and define your position.
Well, I would say that I don't have definitely as good of an education on specifically Christianity as you two do.
Okay.
Just, I haven't been to church in a long time. But for me, I grew up my parents are divorced, so I grew up spending time with both of them. And my dad is very conservative, go to church kind of guy. And my mom is very liberal, not go to church. So I got both sides of it. And parts of it that I just didn't fully accept were when I went to church, there were a lot of things that I saw as picking and choosing from like the Old Testament. And again, I can only speak on like Christianity. I can't speak on other religions, but specifically for that, there were things that they would pick and choose from the Old Testament that I was like, why are we talking about this when you're saying that the New Testament is the definitive word of God because Jesus is here now and all this stuff. But then there's one specific aspect of secularism that you don't agree with. So you're going to pick that from the Old Testament and just things like that I didn't agree with.
For sure.
Yeah. No, it's
As a long-time practicing Christian, I 100% agree.
long time practicer, first time caller, right?
I'm
Yeah.
actually a long-time caller, first-time listener.
You guys never pick up. No, I think that any honest Christian looks at the church and says, "There's a whole lot that we're not getting right."
Yeah.
And if they don't see that, I don't think that they're looking critically.
Yeah.
So, but no, I appreciate
Yeah.
you saying
Thank you
all
for
that.
sharing that. Yeah. Anything else before we go on to the last question?
No, go for it.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much. Last question for you here before we deep dive here. What's your favorite movie or favorite couple of movies that we can kind of get an idea of, like, when you watch movies, where do you like to? Yeah.
See,
If
now-
you were going to take a girl on a date,
Okay. So
To watch a movie.
That could be a different answer.
straight out of Compton.
yeah,
He
I
wins.
mean, if it's not that, I mean, are you even a man?
That's a tough question, honestly. I like watching movies,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know if I have a definitive favorite.
Okay. Do you have a specific genre that you lean towards, or category and genre? The same
I'm
thing,
trying to
like-
think back to high school and think if there's anything specific. Ross was way more of a let's watch X than you or
Yeah.
I were.
I mean, see, I don't. There's not even like a movie that I watch every year because
Okay.
it's my favorite. I would say like miniseries.
Oh,
I
yeah.
watch Band of Brothers every year.
Yes.
It's so on brand for somebody in the military.
It is, especially someone that works with paratroopers, and it's a show about paratroopers.
When you watch movies, how often is it a war movie?
Not often. After joining, not often. Before joining, it was probably one of my favorite genres.
Yeah, I remember that much.
Now I watch those movies and I see all the mistakes that they make, and it takes me out of it completely.
I'm pretty sure I watched Black Hawk Down with you like 5 times in high school.
Maybe.
I went to church with someone.
Was that before or after we cuddled in your pull-out couch upstairs?
Classic.
Might have even been during.
I got to meet someone from the Black Hawk Down. He was a local guy from Wayne County area that
Really?
ended up going to my church. I can't remember his name, but I remember when that movie came out that someone had made a connection. He was like, "Yeah, he was on that. I don't know if platoon or I don't know the right terms, but he was in that group that story was about." So yeah.
I'm really into horror movies.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, I didn't used to be, but I am now. Especially satirical horror.
Okay. Give us an example.
One of my favorite movies. All right,
Scary
this is-
movie or like scary movie?
No, a little less satirical than that. A movie that something like Cabin in the Woods, kind of satirical
Oh,
horror.
that's a great satire horror movie.
But my favorite satirical horror movie is Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
Never heard of that.
Love that movie.
All right, elevator pitch.
Yes.
2 backwoods men,
Okay.
very good friends.
Love it.
A group of college students going up to the mountains for spring break.
Okay.
From their perspective, from the college students' perspective, Tucker and Dale are trying to murder all of them.
Okay.
But every single one of these murders is actually a mishap on the college students, and Tucker and Dale are actually trying to prevent them from killing themselves. That's the elevator pitch. It's great.
I'd watch that.
And even though that's a spoiler of the entire plot of the movie, like it's still 100% worth the watch.
Is this modern or has this been out for a while?
Yeah.
It's probably been out for what, like 10, 15 years
Okay.
now?
Yeah. Alan Tudyk is one of the main characters.
Oh,
in it.
okay, yeah.
And Alan Tudyk, of course, had his big break in Firefly, just like
I'll take your word for it.
what's his name?
Adam Baldwin.
Adam Baldwin.
Right on. Well, awesome. Is there, and you've listened to our podcast before, is there any episodes that you've listened to that you have any notes on or any thoughts about, like
Strong
previous episodes
agreement,
or-
disagreement,
Yeah.
additional
Any-
opinions.
I would say that for the most part, other than your political views, and I agree with some of them, but
Right.
you're just further on the spectrum than I am.
The autism
more ways
spectrum.
than one.
Yeah, you got a 19 from what I hear.
It's public domain right now at this point.
But I don't necessarily disagree with a lot of the things that you guys say. Favorite episodes?
Not favorite.
No,
but
no,
was
no.
there any that stood
Like,
out? Or any,
so, for example, I know because we talked about it before Jeff and I recorded. You and I had a long phone call, and in it we talked about Into the Wild.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Well, because
That's your favorite movie so far. that
so
you've-
far,
yeah.
within the category of the top 250, that's my favorite one so far, and still is.
And that's a movie that I remember watching with you multiple times, Nelson, in
Yes.
high school.
yeah,
And it's a movie that I very much enjoyed when I was a teenager, and because I loved the romanticism of being a nomad and going out and kind of being free and finding your own way and all this stuff. And now I watch it and I just see a selfish idiot
Right.
who makes terrible decisions and ends up dead in Alaska.
Yeah.
So
I remember watching it with my dad once. I got him to sit down and watch it with me when I was still in high school. And that was his takeaway at the end of it. And I was like, how is that your takeaway? You missed so much. And now I come back to it as an adult. I'm like, no, Dad, you're totally right.
absolutely.
But I still love it.
But again, that's perspective, right?
Yeah.
Back then, it didn't feel like we had people that relied on us. Now we do.
Right.
So
Like for you, the entire nation of America
that's right. All 330 million of them are looking to me
Yeah.
for guidance.
on their gunshot wounds.
Call me flabbergasted.
Any other movies that we've covered already that you had a thought on?
I don't know. I'd have to think about it, honestly.
I know with Groundhog Day, you disagree with us, and me specifically.
I disagree with you that it's not a good movie.
I don't. So
That you wouldn't. You said you wouldn't put it in your top 250.
yeah, I want to clarify because maybe I misspoke. I like Groundhog Day. I think it's a good movie. I think though that if you're an adult and you haven't already seen it, there's so many comedies out that like it's gonna feel reductive, only because they're paying homage to it.
I got you. All right, so let's get into this movie.
Yes, let's.
So this movie is essentially has 2 acts. The first act we are following.
And that's bizarre in itself that it's 2 and not 3.
Yeah, it's usually. Well, you've got the. I was about to quote The Prestige, but I forgot the lines. The third act, which is called The Prestige, anyways,
Is not in this movie.
is not in this movie. Yeah, no, like so. The first half is you're following this group of individuals.
Ragtag.
Yeah, and you're following them and watching them come together become, as you said earlier, part of the machine. And then the second half is watching that machine go to work. So before we get into some of these specific biases, as someone who's in the military, currently active, and first of all, thank you. Thank you for your service.
Please don't do this.
Okay. Well,
Thank you for your service.
thank you for your service. I genuinely we can bypass it. But
I do appreciate
I'm
it.
grateful.
I'm
yeah.
just.
I don't think I've ever once
grateful.
thanked Connor for his service, and I'm going to continue that trend.
I used to work
That's
at
what happens when you're born in Canada.
I used to work at Chipotle. And I'd get in trouble because I would comp every military person that would come in, and I wasn't allowed because I'd always go through all of our daily comps. I would end up spending more of the store's money because I was like, no. So yeah, but I'm grateful. So anyways, moving on. Not to get all mushy over here, but as someone from the military and currently active in the military, what are some things that, and not specifically storylines or themes, but what's something that initially about this movie that just sticks out to you that's either good or bad or like
Let's go with one. What's one thing in this movie that you were like totally inaccurate? I hate it. I can't get past it.
I like it. Yeah.
Totally inaccurate. I was just about to talk about all the things that I thought were accurate. Actually,
I know. I figured you would, so I wanted to put you on the back foot.
Is there more accuracy?
absolutely. Like
Okay, cool,
at least in the
Awesome.
boot camp part.
Okay.
Absolutely. If you want to talk about things that were totally inaccurate, it's the way that all of the Marines act when they're in Vietnam.
Okay.
It's their complete loss of humanity, and just that they're these killing machines. They all have nicknames. That, like none of them are individuals.
Yeah.
That was a part that I really had a strong issue with.
Now, Connor, and this is going to sound to the folks at home like I don't know my own friend. Have you seen Active Duty?
I am active duty. If you're talking about if I've seen combat,
Yes, sorry.
Deployment.
I don't know the.
What's the definition? Like, would deployment mean what's?
so a deployment is anything that takes you away from your home station.
Okay.
So there's CONUS deployments, which is continental United States.
Okay.
And there's OCONUS deployments. There are people. OCONUS is outside the United States.
Sure.
And there are people that are in the military that will
United
tell
States, as a foreigner, does that include Alaska and Hawaii?
you it does.
Okay.
But there are people that will tell you that anything that isn't direct action combat in a war zone is not technically a deployment.
Okay.
Like people deploy to Kuwait all the time just for training or security reasons, whatever. They'll tell you that that's not a deployment, but you're still away from your family for 6 months. So I would consider it a deployment. It's just not a combat deployment.
Okay.
I see that.
fair.
I see that.
You were present in Afghanistan for the withdrawal, correct?
I was not in Afghanistan.
Okay.
I was part of. You can keep this in, by the way.
Okay.
I was part of the mission for withdrawing all of our troops from Afghanistan.
Okay.
Wow.
So I was not at Fort Bragg. I was sent someplace else. I won't get into details about that.
The moon.
But yep, we were on the moon. We were just putting the flag back up. It fell down.
Space Force.
No, we got sent somewhere else to help with or facilitate soldiers getting out of the country to go to Afghanistan. We were going through all of their medical supplies, making sure that they had everything that they needed, putting things in shipping containers that were missing that we stole from the Air Force. Sorry, Air Force. But we needed them for the mission. So I was part of that. I was actually supposed to go to Afghanistan, and then President Biden stopped all troops from leaving past a certain date, and the date that I was supposed to go was one day after.
Oh my goodness.
Okay.
So I didn't end up going to Afghanistan, but I was supposed to be there for it. But I've got a lot of friends that were there at HKIA, the airport.
Now, I know for occupational reasons, you can't weigh in on your opinion on these things. I just want the details.
I just want the details.
Yeah, just the specific...
Anything that can be redacted.
Right.
Yeah.
My understanding is that Biden committed to plans established by the previous administration, Donald Trump. Is that correct?
That is correct. So
So
they
even though it was scheduled withdrawal, you were still scheduled deployment for the day after the scheduled withdrawal? Or did they change the date of withdrawal?
no. So the scheduled withdrawal was a hard date.
Okay.
This was before that date, and it was just to send. You okay there?
That whiskey's so smooth. Put hair on your chest. Okay, continue, please.
The scheduled withdrawal was a hard date. This was a day that came before that hard date that the president said we're not sending anybody else.
Okay.
So the hard date was to get everybody out of Afghanistan. This was a
gotcha.
day where he said nobody else is going over to Afghanistan.
No new arrivals.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's correct.
All right.
All right. So one thing in the movie that you saw that was inaccurate.
It's just the way that the soldiers, or the Marines, I guess I should say. Sorry to any Marines out there. I didn't mean to insult you. The way that the Marines act while they're over there. It's just,
right.
it feels more like a caricature of real military members.
That's fair.
Now,
probably.
do you, as some, I may
But
be-
you've not yourself seen combat.
No,
That's right.
But I have plenty of friends that have, I've heard plenty of stories. We do a lot of training. We see a lot of videos. I mean, I've been spun up for deployments about 10 times, and just every single time,
For whatever reason.
they get canceled.
I do pray a lot.
Yeah?
Yeah, I pray a lot that my boy Connor doesn't.
Well-
not that you don't see combat, but that you are safe.
I'm heading to an infantry division that's supposed to deploy to Iraq soon. So
Start praying harder.
do you have to go through, is this part of your, like, do you go through like military history, or like, do you know much about the Vietnam War? I guess is what I'm kind of leading into. Like, are you familiar with past excursions or military?
do you mean personally, or like while you're in the military? Do they?
Both, actually. I'm curious.
Academic.
How much military history does the military teach you?
Yeah.
Not a lot, actually.
Okay.
So when you're in basic training, there are, at least for the Army, there are some classes that you do where they teach you some of that Army history specifically. It's not big military, but usually it's restricted to just the Army. But it's not a lot because there's a lot more hands-on training that you have to do. So they don't
Sounds
focus
hot.
on that.
That makes sense. Wow.
Personally, I would say that I am more familiar with like World War II history over Vietnam, World War II, and Cold War history, just because I have family members that were directly involved in those conflicts.
Adolf Hitler, for example.
That's right. He was my grandfather.
You can write that down, folks.
He's the reason why my arm just won't go down.
It's just like, he's the reason I have this silly walk I do.
Lock the knees. Lock the knees.
To be clear, Adolf Hitler was not my grandfather. My grandfather fought against Adolf Hitler.
Snopes would have figured.
In a one-on-one boxing match.
So I would say that Cold War and World War II are more things that I'm familiar with, and then obviously the war in Afghanistan, just because when I joined the military, we were still at war in Afghanistan.
Okay.
With or in?
In.
Okay.
Okay.
We were never at war with Afghanistan. We were just at war in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
There's a distinction. I know you think it's a distinction without a difference, but it's a distinction.
You guys should see Nelson's grin. Nelson's having the time of his life right now.
So Vietnam and Korea are things that I'm not super familiar with, just things that I've learned in school. So.
Okay, cool. So the reason I was asking that is like, was there stuff going in? And you said you've seen this movie more than once. Is there things in this movie that you would see as accurate or inaccurate when it comes to depictions of Vietnam? Like specifically the Vietnam
From your
War.
experience,
not
in
necessarily
Vietnam.
the country. It's not necessarily the country of Vietnam, but just I guess I'm
All that time I spent in Southeast Asia.
I'm loosely making an assumption. I was just making an observation. Like, do you know anything about the Vietnam War? Just being that you're affiliated with.
Yeah, actually, it was police action.
So I will say that the withdrawal of Afghanistan was very much compared to the way that the Vietnam War ended.
Compared
the fall of
or
Saigon.
comparable?
Compared, like in the military, we compared it
Okay.
to
Okay.
the fall of Saigon. Like so much so that we called it the fall of Kabul.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But as far as like the rest of the Vietnam War, I don't know a whole lot. If I'm honest, I'm a little ignorant on the subject.
No, that's okay. I was just curious where it's not often I talk to people who were in the military, so it's more just out of curiosity and just like I'm authentically intrigued about just like what you guys go through, especially after watching a movie like this. Like this movie, and I've seen other military movies, but there's things in every movie that captures different aspects of it. And just this one, I'm like, there's just things I'm like, man, is that really how it is? Like,
I mean, if you want to
intense.
talk about technical things, technical aspects of this movie that they just nailed for the military, I got that all day.
Okay.
But as far as the war itself, just not a Vietnam War expert.
Okay. No, and that's fair. That's fair. Yeah.
Now, one thing that you hinted at, and I'm curious about, because it defies some of the narrative I've seen. This movie, according to people that fought in Vietnam, nails the boot camp experience.
Mhm.
And I've seen narrative saying boot camp is very different now. But you said that a lot of that felt very authentic. How true to the at least your boot camp experience is the boot camp experience depicted in Full Metal Jacket?
So I will say that the Marine Corps is different than the Army.
Of course.
And theirs
That checks out.
seems to be a little more
At
intense.
least in spelling.
That's right.
There seems to be a little more intense. I will never say that the Marine Corps is better than the Army. I don't care what my brother, who is a former Marine, says.
Not a brother in arm, literal brother.
My literal brother, who actually doesn't have much love for the Marine Corps because they did a lot of things that he wasn't happy with.
Yeah.
But I digress. As far as the technical things in the boot camp scenes, it was extremely accurate and close to what I experienced. Other than like the first introduction that you get to Arlie Ermey's drill instructor, where he's causing Gomer Pyle to choke himself on his hand and he's hitting people and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That wouldn't fly today.
Okay.
But the things that he's saying to them, absolutely. The stuff that I experienced.
Was that depiction accurate to then?
Oh,
Like-
100%.
Oh, for sure.
Oh, okay.
For
So
sure.
there's very little, if any, embellishment to the timepiece of this.
Yeah,
Okay.
if you look into authenticity of this movie,
Okay, they were that physical,
yeah,
hands-on.
and that's
Okay.
something that
And
I'm
they
gonna
still
talk
do
about
that
later.
today
Okay.
a little bit. But I can't say today because it's been, almost 5 years since I went
Yeah.
to basic training, and it has changed a lot since I went. But as far as like choking and slapping and hitting and all that stuff, they can't do that anymore.
Mm.
That doesn't mean necessarily that it doesn't happen.
It happened. I saw aspects of it happen.
Yeah,
Just not to that extent.
yeah,
Sure.
I got you.
But like the things that they said, the things that he was saying to them, all the racist things, all the swearing and
The
belittling
the
them,
sexual and stuff.
So-
about,
that stuff that I saw for sure.
Okay,
One question I have specifically, because he makes full eye contact with a black man when he says there is no racial bigotry here, and then lists serious racial slurs,
right.
including a specific word that begins with an N that I will never repeat.
Preach.
Have you heard that in the military?
No.
Okay, because for whatever reason, and there are a lot of good reasons, that specific word is at a different category than most other racial slurs. And you commented that you heard a bunch of racist stuff in the military.
Not a bunch. Let me clarify. It's not that I've heard a
direct
bunch.
quote. They only ever said racist things.
I don't remember saying this, so this could be stricken from the record.
Roll back the tape.
So again, I can only speak on the Army, but for the Army, there is an equal opportunity program
Right.
that we have to do. It's an annual training that we have to do. We have to do that and sexual harassment and assault every year.
Okay.
And that specifically goes over things like that. And it is 100% not tolerated.
For sure.
If any of that happens, you can report that person and they will get in trouble for that.
Gotcha.
But it does happen.
It does happen. There's incidences where it's not reported.
Now, and this is something that's in the movie that I think Kubrick put in very intentionally, is despite this strong racial conversation that even happens in Vietnam, you see with Adam Baldwin's character, with the second prostitute that we meet, he says, all N-words hang, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then very clearly is very emotionally distraught when 8-Ball is shot.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously Kubrick is pointing out, and I think that for a modern audience, it's unrecognizable that despite this racially charged conversation, there was a very strong brotherhood and acceptance. Now, when you say that you've heard racist stuff from drill sergeants, is
Not necessarily drill sergeants.
okay? In boot camp, I want to quote you as closely as possible here. You experienced racially charged comments in boot camp. Was there that same context of this is more of a brotherly hazing?
Like gym locker room talk.
Not in boot camp, or we call it basic training. So not,
Sorry.
They call it boot camp in the Marine Corps, so you're fine.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But not necessarily in basic training like that, because you're thrown together with these group of people that you've never met before, and you're only with them for 10 weeks, and then you're all going to go your separate ways. That sense of brotherhood is really only felt when you're with your unit. Once you get there, once you get through all your training, then you develop this friendship and this sense of brotherhood where you are willing to die for the person next to you. And you'll say things to them. There's a lot of dark humor
Of course.
in the military.
Yeah.
Just the nature of the job.
Yeah. Same thing with medics, right? Like paramedics in a
A medical field.
civilian context. Paramedics also have dark humor.
Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of dark humor just because of the nature of the job, and so things will get said, and you learn very quickly to develop a thick skin, and that none of that actually really applies. That they don't actually mean what they're saying.
Right.
It's just mostly a joke.
Sure.
For instance, in the movie,
Ball busting.
yeah, in the movie, that's not the first time that Animal Mother does that.
Oh, really?
When you first meet Animal Mother, when Joker gets to that squad and he's talking to Animal Mother and they're going back and forth, and then 8-Ball comes up and kind of breaks them up, and then they go to sit back down. Animal Mother says to 8-Ball something about being a jungle bunny, and then says,
that's right.
Thank God for that sickle cell.
I don't get.
I missed that.
What's sickle cell?
Sickle cell anemia?
Sickle cell anemia. It's a disease
blood
that's
disease
common
that's
in African Americans.
Oh, good lord.
Yeah.
And then
Wow, I missed
8-Ball
that
just kind of hits him
completely.
on the chest and he says, "Yep, you got it, Animal." Like, it's just the ball busting that they do.
Wow.
For full context of our listeners,
Connor text.
yeah, thank you,
Sorry.
Connor. I know from discussion, but also just from looking at you, you're very Irish.
Yes, I am.
How much ball busting do you get over being Irish?
None,
Really?
actually.
How much ball busting do you get over being white?
Not much, really.
I feel like there's a big missed opportunity. If any of Connor's friends are listening, please, on my behalf, make fun of him about the potato famine, something, anything.
So what are some things that we talked about duality? What's the next level or next item that kind of came up in this movie that was a kind of an overarching theme?
Well, I think it starts off with the overarching theme of the movie.
Okay.
The opening scene is when they're getting their haircuts,
Yes.
which, by the way, worst haircut you will ever get in your life. when you're at boot camp or basic training and those guys are just shaving your heads. You can actually see it on these actors because I believe Kubrick didn't tell them that they were going through that when they first got there. It's extremely uncomfortable. They are not gentle with your head at all. They're digging those clippers into your scalp.
Really?
And then on top of all of it, you have to pay for it at the end. It's $7 every time.
That doesn't surprise me.
And you get 4 of them.
Where does that $7 go? Who gets that?
The bar.
They give you a little card when you first get there, and you have to swipe it.
So much of the military wasted spending is taxpayer dollar. Can we not afford to pay for haircuts?
Nope, we can't.
It's just not in the military budget.
It'll be on the next ballot.
It's the worst haircut you'll ever have in your life.
Okay, so I'm looking at you right now, Connor. Sorry, I'm staring at you. Your hair is not that length anymore. Is there a point? And again, I'm just dumb. Is there a point in which after basic that you can have different lengths of hair now? Like,
yeah.
Okay, so it's just for basic that it has to be.
It's only basic training or boot camp.
Okay.
You get that haircut, and again, like I said, the overarching theme for me is the loss of individuality and the loss of innocence.
Okay.
And you start off with that scene where they're getting their haircuts, and they're all exactly the same. You get that buzz cut, and at least for the Army, they told us that the reason why everybody gets their head shaved is one, hygiene. To make sure, lice and things like that aren't getting in because you're spending 10 weeks living in the same room as a bunch of other guys.
Right.
But it's also making sure that you have no individuality at that point. You're wearing the same uniform.
Do they tell you that?
You're wearing the same uniform. You have the same haircut. You're all the same. Doesn't matter what color you are. Doesn't matter what sexual orientation you are. What creed you come from.
What gender. What.
I think the overarching theme of the movie starts at the beginning.
Okay.
I love that. Yeah.
Now, Connor, if you choose not to comment on this, I understand. For me, what I saw there is step 1 of a brainwashing. We haven't covered this movie yet, Jeff, but we will eventually. V for Vendetta.
That's right. It's on early. Yeah.
When
that'll probably be one this year. We'll probably get to that this year, I assume.
That'd be great. I love that movie. There's a scene where Natalie Portman's character is imprisoned and they shave her head then, and same thing with the Nazi internment camps, and actually for the exact same reasons, hygiene and individuality.
Removing,
So for me, what I see there is step 1 of our brainwashing. We're going to deprogram you from yourself and program you to be a killing machine. And this is something that I point out a lot to my friends before they enlist. If they tell me that they're going to enlist, this is something I say to them. Yes, you aren't. Yes, murder is premeditated, right? And that's a difference between murder and killing per se. But step 1 in military career is to be deprogrammed and programmed to kill. And in that sense, you have premeditated. You've been taught that as a reaction, this is the result. And so this deprogramming and reprogramming part for me was really uncomfortable watching in real time these young men be brainwashed into being killing machines. And for some of them, that does, as Connor mentioned earlier, some of them that code switch doesn't happen. That's not the right term for that, but that switch doesn't really happen until they're actually in Vietnam. In fact, one of the last scenes of the movie is who's the photographer?
Oh, the journalist.
I don't remember his name.
So the photographer,
Rafterman.
Rafterman, thank you. So Rafterman, in most of the scenes, is nauseous at the sight of violence.
Right. He was the one that was nauseous in the helicopter, right?
He was vomiting in the helicopter, and he's the one that kills the young girl, sniper.
Yeah.
And then he's celebrating.
At the end?
Yeah.
Joker kills him.
No.
He
shoots.
Okay,
yeah.
He shoots her.
You're right. So she starts shooting at them. Joker drops his rifle and then draws his pistol. Is it a pistol or a handgun?
It's a pistol.
And then Rafterman shoots her several times, and she doesn't die. You're correct. Joker kills her. But he's celebrating it having brought her down, even though he is the one that so far has been the most viscerally responsive to violence in the movie. And then Joker kills her.
And obviously, I think we can all agree. This goes without saying, but just my personality needs to solidify this. None of us are pro death or pro, but in general, do you think he's celebrating not necessarily the termination of a life, but just the fact that he overcame what everyone else in his troop were because he had that inability to not hold himself together when it came to those actions. Do you think he was celebrating just the ability to finally be there with the rest of his crew? not necessarily that specific action, but mostly just the ability. Like I did
go
it.
first,
I'm
Connor.
now like that's the way I perceived it. It wasn't that he was happy at a loss of life, but it was just the fact that he was like, I'm finally where everyone else is.
So I don't know if that's necessarily what he's celebrating. I can tell you that nobody in the well, I can't say nobody because there are some sick people that join at times.
Right.
But most people in the military don't celebrate taking another person's life.
Right.
You're doing it not even because of yourself. Like you join the military knowing at some point you could die, and you just have to accept that. But what really drives you
And take a life.
yeah. But what really drives you is protecting the person to the left and right of you. So I think more he was just happy that he saved Joker from getting killed.
I get that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
And I would say,
And that would be a visceral emotion.
Yeah.
Like, that would be
Absolutely.
something. Yeah. That would. Okay.
Absolutely.
That makes sense. Okay.
that's a distinction without a difference.
Distinction without a difference.
So
Break that down for me.
he's celebrating having saved Joker's life.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I can't disagree with that. But he's celebrating the way that he saved Joker's life was by
Removing a life.
taking a life. Yeah, exactly. Now, yes, as Connor pointed out previously, technically he didn't. Joker does moments later. But he is celebrating that he was able to be violent in this situation. Now, listen, I'm a pacifist, right? So like celebrating violence, it's always going to hit me the same way. I understand that there's additional context here to the violence. I get that. But ultimately, he's celebrating that when it mattered, he was able to be violent.
Good. You can
Tell me why I'm
correct
wrong.
No. Like
I don't necessarily think you're wrong. I just think that there's a different mentality when you are in that position.
Sure.
So none of us really, I don't want to say care, but the political aspect of war is not something that we think about, right? We get sent somewhere and we've got a job to do. And it's just, it's what we're trained for. It's what we have to accomplish.
Right.
So like I said, at the end of the day, especially under the Geneva Convention, we're not trying to kill a bunch of people. But if I have to protect the person who's next to me, I'm going to do that.
yeah.
I will say, though, that throughout this movie, it is very emphasized that these are killers.
Yeah, and that's why I brought up earlier why I think that this is more a caricature of the way that
that's fair.
real
Yeah,
people would act in that situation.
With what you were saying, Nelson, I kind of made a comparison to something in my personal life, and without going into too specific details, my wife and I recently adopted a child.
A beautiful child.
And that joy for my wife and I came from someone else's grief. Lindsay and I at no point were happy about the fact that someone took a loss for us to take a gain. But at that same time, we had that juxtaposition of emotions of like utter joy, like unexpressible joy because we finally achieved something we've been striving for. So we were joyful. We were excited. We were very emotional. It wasn't at the expense of a loss, though. So could it be possible that kid, was it Rafter?
Rafterman.
Rafterman. Could it be possible that his expression has nothing to do with the violence at all, except it could just be the fact that there is a life saved? Like there was,
it's the relief that you feel in that high stress situation.
So he's not rejoicing at all that there. Maybe there's a perspective. Maybe that there was a loss, but it's just the fact that there was a life.
But I also don't think that that's what Kubrick was going for, if I'm honest.
Okay.
I'm projecting my own personal biases into this.
Same, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the entire point of this movie is that loss of innocence and that loss of individuality.
Yeah.
And so
Sure.
maybe Kubrick was trying to show that he was happy to be part of the group, that he finally got that kill that everybody else had already gotten. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think in reality, he'd be happy that he saved his brother in arms.
100%. Yeah.
But maybe the movie's trying to say something else.
Yeah.
If we can step back a little bit chronologically in the movie, the first moment that got me in this movie was Piles, the culmination of Piles' character.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I saw it going a different. I was receiving the way they were setting him up a different way. I was seeing him as someone who's overcoming this lack of. I saw him being as like the hero of the story, not becoming essentially a villain or not a villain, but like someone who got
Indoctrinated.
twisted. Right? Like that caught me off guard, and maybe just because I had never seen this movie or like I didn't know what to expect. Like that was probably the hardest part for me in this movie was that bathroom scene with Pyle.
Yeah.
I kid you not, I viscerally had my hands up to my face. Look, I don't know why I do because I'm watching the movie still. I'm still watching it like this. Like the hands,
Eyes split, so
the
you can
hands are
still
doing
see.
nothing. I'm watching the movie with the hands over my eyes, but like that was the hardest part for me in this movie because I was rooting for Pyle the whole time, which was probably the point.
Right.
I'm like, man, like
You gotta give Kubrick his due there.
right. Oh, absolutely. And because like I never once saw myself as a military person. I was never athletic. I was never, and I'm still not. I wouldn't say I've ever achieved any of these goals. But like for me, military is one of those things. Like, yeah, I had friends that was in the military that I graduated high school with and stuff. Like very, very grateful for them and stuff. But like that was never my thing. I actually was scared of the draft at some point because when I was younger, 9/11 happened, and the draft never happened. But like there was always
I was so happy when I hit 26.
I really was because like
I joined at 26.
I know you did.
I just knew that was something like I was not going to do well. Like if they were to happen, I would do it. Like at the time I was very passionate about my country and stuff. Like I was like, I'll do it. But like they're going to regret enlisting me because like I'm not going to be what they want. It's like, so I was rooting for Pyle in this movie because I was like, man, like that would be me. I would be the one struggling, trying to adapt, trying to connect with all these other people who've probably been preparing their whole life for this lifestyle. And then next thing I know, he's in the bathroom and I'm like, oh no. Like, and that was hard for me. I don't know where I'm going with this, but that was the first moment I was like, oh yeah, this is a Kubrick film. Like, but my question is, does that happen a lot? I don't know if this is where the term AWOL comes. Maybe AWOL means something completely different. But like someone shifting, making a left turn. Like, does this
Section 8?
Yeah, that's right. That's what the term was. Is this normal or
It's more of a slow progression.
Okay.
AWOL, by the way, stands for absent without leave.
Absent
so that's
without
just
leave.
when
Okay.
you're gone, you don't come back.
Okay.
And you have to be gone for I think it's like a month before they're like, hey, you're AWOL
Just
and we got to go find this guy,
dishonorable
and then you
discharge.
can be arrested and all this stuff.
Oh, okay.
But
So you have a few more weeks yet.
that's right. Right now I'm just out of ranks. No, I'm on leave.
Okay. So
But I would say that transition is slower than
Okay.
the movie
shows.
depicts.
Okay.
I will say though that Lawrence or Private Pyle, whatever you want to call him, that scene in the bathroom, it didn't affect me too much, but it made me think about an experience that I had in basic training, where it was very similar to that, where there was a guy who had something happen to him in reception. Reception's when you first get there. It's the first week where they issue you all of your gear, your uniforms, you get all your shots, all this stuff before you actually go to basic training. Something happened to him. It was a traumatic experience while he was there. And so the entire time through basic training, he was kind of at this mental break. And like to the point where he kept saying he was going to take rounds, ammunition from the shooting ranges we went to and bring them back to the barracks where all of our weapons were just hanging from our bunks every night. And he was talking about how he could kill everybody, he could kill himself, all this stuff. So they took his weapon away from him.
Yeah.
And they put 2 people to watch him at all times. And when you're in basic training, you have to have a battle buddy system. So you have to have
Why wouldn't
one
they just
person with you.
discharge him at that point?
Yeah.
Well, they were waiting for a medical discharge,
Okay.
Oh, okay.
but that takes a lot of time. Everything in the military takes a lot of time because there's red
Bureaucracy.
tape. Yep, the bureaucracy is the worst part about the military. So they put 2 people on him instead of just one. Because like I said, in basic
Constant
training, you have to
watch.
have a battle buddy with you at all times. Doesn't matter if you're going to the bathroom or if you're going, across the hall. You have to take somebody with you.
Okay.
But they put 2 people on him to watch him, and he went to the bathroom one day. And the way that our bathrooms were set up, there was like stalls on one side, and it was kind of like a horseshoe shaped. And then on the other side was the showers. And so these 2 guys that were supposed to be with him were kind of on the shower side. On the stall side, it faced the street, and there were windows that were about 2.5 feet wide at the top of the wall that you could open. And they heard one of the windows open, and then this guy jumped out the window. And it was only a 2-story building, so he didn't die. But he hit the ground, and they stopped all of us from going outside.
Yeah.
But we're all watching through the windows just to see what's going on.
Right.
And all the drill sergeants were around him, and they checked to make sure he was still alive, and he was,
Vitals.
but he was obviously injured. And at that point, to go back to the beginning of the movie, asking how accurate it is when they're yelling at him, they're just standing around him in a horseshoe, yelling at him, telling him that he's an idiot, and that if he really wanted to succeed, he should have jumped from a taller building. Things like that.
Oh my gosh.
So,
Wow.
yeah, that scene where he's in the bathroom, that's something that I've personally not to that
Right,
level,
right.
but I've experienced in the military for sure.
Is there support like and again, obviously, like 2023, like there's a lot of mental health talk just in general in all medias. Is there support from the beginning of reception? It's called reception at the beginning, like to where you're at now, where it's now your job, and it's like, do you have support when it comes to mental health, or because like you're in a field that's very unfamiliar to a lot of people, and you're experiencing things, you're training for things that is a fairy tale to most people. Like, do you have like a next level type of support system for those things? So it prevents you from having those moments. 'Cause that's heartbreaking.
There's
Like-
a bit of a support system like that,
Okay.
but the issue again is the red tape, the bureaucracy he was talking about that you have to go through. So we've got behavioral health, and then we've got what's called an MFLAC, which is the Military Family Life Counselor.
Okay.
MFLACs are easier to get to talk to, but they're not able to prescribe you anything.
Okay.
They're not like actual doctors like
It's
behavioral health is.
therapy.
So that's if you just need to talk to somebody. Behavioral health is if you need to go see a therapist that can prescribe you medication, that kind of thing. And the only way to get into those places quickly is if you're suicidal. But if you're suicidal, that bars you from doing most things in the military.
Right.
They'll flag you, and you can't do things that could potentially make that worse
Classic
for you.
Catch-22.
Well, I wouldn't say Catch-22.
Well, I mean, like, that's what the book Catch-22 is basically about.
Yeah, I'm familiar.
I'm
with the book.
unfamiliar with the book.
It's not my favorite book, but
So, World War II, men stationed in Italy, they want to be discharged. The way to be discharged is to be found mentally unfit for war.
Mm-hmm.
But anybody who is able to articulate well why they're unfit is clearly
Not
mentally
unfit.
competent.
yeah, I mean, that's fair. Like for instance, just me personally, I've got some family things that I've been dealing with for the past few years now, just like health concerns and things like that have really affected me mentally. But I tried to get an appointment with behavioral health, and the soonest that I could get an appointment was 6 months out from when I called.
At that point, you might as well not even bother. That's
Right.
ridiculous.
Now, can you seek help from an outside source?
You can, as long as they take the military insurance, and that's a little bit easier to do.
Okay.
Um,
okay.
It's just not something that I've done yet. But
Gotcha.
So I guess, and we can go on to a different topic or something. But that for me, that was probably the most climactic moment of this movie for me. Was watching that play out, because like as much as I hate,
that was basically the end of the first half.
it was
of the
very
movie.
close. Yeah.
the only part of the movie that I actually enjoyed watching.
Was a man killing himself?
No, the the first half.
Right. And like it just that was. I was captivated by it, but at the same time, I'm like, man, this like it can't be this way. I'm like this cannot be the way this is. Like, and I'm very much. If you look at me wrong, I'll cry. Like I'm an emotional person. Like I'm very much like I grew up with 4 sisters and stuff. So like I lean more towards more like I'm a lover, not a fighter type of guy. So watching a lot of these things depicted, especially in that first half, just the yelling and the name calling, even that was more aggressive to me than some of the military scenes that were played out. And then just watching him who enlisted to help save his country, but then ended up becoming a victim of the system, the American system.
Mm-hmm.
That was hard to watch.
It happens though, and again, not to harp too much on the beginning of this movie, but just the accuracy of that boot camp section of the movie was. After watching it, because I watched it before before I was in the military, and now watching it again after I've been in the military, I had a much more visceral reaction to that part of the movie than I thought that
The
I would.
second half, yeah.
just because of the things that I saw where I was like, wow, I remember exactly that happening to me, or I remember exactly that happening to somebody else, or that's super accurate to what we had to do. I enjoyed that part of the movie.
Yeah.
Obviously not the part where he kills himself,
No,
but
I got you.
the rest of it, even talking to people, obviously I've never seen combat, but it's talking to people that have seen combat, that part, it just very unrealistic to me, at least now. Again, Vietnam was 50 years ago or 60 years ago now, so I don't
totally
know.
a different conflict entirely.
Yeah.
Now, one question I have, because you look online at, I have so many questions, but one specifically, you look online, you see a lot of Vietnam vets saying that the boot camp experience and even the military, like the conflict experience, was pretty authentic. And you just said, and I saw this echoed in a lot of comments I saw online from veterans, that the boot camp experience, like, you appreciated it.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the first things I thought of when I saw it from a veteran, and I'm wondering it now too from you, is there some amount of like Stockholm syndrome there?
I don't know about Stockholm syndrome. I actually recently saw a video where they were talking about this thing that happens in the military where it's called fire guard. Actually, it's what Joker's on the last night when he finds Lawrence in the bathroom.
Right.
Where you will get woken up by a person who's standing there with a red flashlight in your face telling you it's your turn for fire guard.
And that's essentially just security, floor security?
Yeah, pretty much. You sit at a desk for an hour and you take inventory of all the weapons to make sure none of the weapons are missing, and then you call up a little security check to a drill
really,
sergeant.
then Joker's already missed something if he didn't notice that.
Yeah,
Lawrence
if he didn't notice that he wasn't in his bed with his weapon,
Yeah.
he missed something.
Okay.
But when I was watching that video, there were people that were saying, what if you woke up one day and it was just a person standing over you with a red flashlight saying it's your turn for fire guard, and everything that you've experienced up until now was all part of a dream? And most people were like, I would love that. I would go back in a heartbeat. And it's not because of loving the experience of basic training or boot camp. It's that you've learned so much since then that you could fix the mistakes that you've made. Or there are people that you've met in the military that are dead now for whatever reason, and you might be able to save them. That kind of thing. Yeah. So it's not so much that we loved the fact that we were in this completely structured environment where we were getting yelled at all the time. It's just that you've learned a lot since then.
And there's a lot of growth that happens.
Mm-hmm.
And with growth comes adhering to
Medical
that
procedures.
progress. You're thinking of a different type of growth, Nelson.
Oh.
Yeah, so I can never going through that. I can see the logic behind going through that type of transformation and going, that's special. Like that makes sense to me.
And there is that camaraderie that comes with being in the suck together.
Yeah,
like
suck.
You're going through this terrible experience, but you're with people that are also going through it, and there's just that bond that you create.
Yeah.
The suck. That's fun. I'm going to use that. I'm such a child.
Can we take a restroom break?
Yeah.
I gotta pee real bad.
I don't know what to say.
I don't remember what we were talking about when we broke.
We were talking about Lawrence killing himself
Thank you so
in the
much.
bathroom.
Okay.
And then I gave my anecdote about what I experienced in basic training with a guy jumping out the window.
Okay.
Was that really where we ended?
That was really where we
We
ended.
broke. I should have paused, then I could pick up. Okay. There's one big takeaway that I have from this movie, as a anarcho-capitalist,
Prostitution's bad.
but more specifically as a Christian anarchist. It has nothing to do with the prostitution in this movie. There's a theme in this movie that is reoccurring that I don't think Kubrick intentionally included because he's not a Christian, but something that was very evident to me as a Christian anarchist. First of all, I have to clarify some of the Christian anarchist perspective that we haven't discussed on the show before.
Okay.
It is my understanding from Scripture that God and Christ are king. All other authority derives from them. Any instruction that is oppositional to what they would say is illegitimate.
Okay.
As is outlined in First Chronicles, maybe First Kings.
Old Testament, nice.
Yeah. When Samuel apologizes to God that the Israelites want a king, God says, hey, it's not your fault, right? They're actually rebelling against me. And then he says, these are the things that kings will do. And if you really want one, I'll give you one. But,
Right.
they're going to tax you. They're going to take your children. They're going to turn your daughters into, he lists a handful of things, and your sons into soldiers, and a handful of other things. It is my understanding from looking at scripture and looking at the modern state that the state is effectively a secular God.
Okay. I'm
All of
tracking.
the authority due Christ, due to God, has been replaced by the state. It is because we do not give the proper honor and authority to God that we have a state as strong as it is. All right, that's my presupposition.
Okay.
My bias.
I'm with you so far.
Okay. So there's a handful of things in this movie, especially in the first half of the movie, that really feed into my bias.
That prove it, or like that
Support it.
support it. There you
Yeah,
go.
yeah,
There
yeah.
you go.
So we have gunnery sergeant, the drill sergeant. He says to his men, pray. And in response to his instruction to pray, all of the men in the barracks say the following: this is my rifle. There are many like it, but this one is mine.
Mhm.
My rifle is my best friend. It is my life. I must master it as I must master my life. Without me, my rifle is useless. Without my rifle, I am useless. I must fire my rifle true. I must shoot straighter than my enemy who is trying to kill me. I must shoot him before he shoots me. I will. Before God, I swear this creed. My rifle and myself are defenders of my country. We are the masters of our enemy. We are the saviors of my life. So be it, until there is no enemy, but peace. Amen.
Amen, sir. Yes, sir.
Now, as somebody who looks at the Pledge of Allegiance, for example, as flag worship, for me, this screams worshiping the state. This is a group of people saying these same words,
Yeah.
like a public call to prayer, where they are worshiping the state and their gun, and like, even in there's specific wording. Before God, I swear this creed. We are the saviors of my life. Amen. Right? We also have later, I love working for Uncle Sam. So it lets me know just who I am. That's one of the, what's the word for that when they're running and chanting?
Cadence.
Cadence. One of the cadences. I love working for Uncle Sam. It lets me know just who I am. Who are these men finding their identity in? Now, as Christians, we believe we find our identity in Christ. But these men find their identity in Uncle Sam, the government. And then later, today is Christmas. There will be a magic show at 0930. Chaplain Charlie will tell you how the free world will conquer communism with the aid of God and a few Marines. God is a hard-on for Marines because we kill everything we see. He plays his games, we play ours. To show our appreciation for such power, we keep heaven packed with fresh souls. God was here before the Marine Corps, so you can give your heart to Jesus, but your ass belongs to the Corps. Do you ladies understand? Now, between these two quotes from the drill sergeant, largely, for me, as a Christian anarchist who sees the state as a subversion of God's supreme authority, both of these just like cry out about how that is true. Kubrick's not a Christian, so I don't think that that's an opinion of his, that he's was an opinion of his, right? Like if Leo Tolstoy had wrote this, I'd be like, oh, well, he's making a point. Kubrick's not a Christian, and he's not an anarchist, right? He's just anti-war, and he chose to put this in. For me, this is just like the epitome of sacrilege. I have questions for both of you, Jeff as a Christian and Connor as a army whatever. Yeah.
That's what we call ourselves.
Army, whatever. There we
Jeff, as a Christian,
Yes.
how much did these moments in the movie bother you? Connor, as a military person, how much did these moments consistent with your experience in boot camp? Jeff first.
So honestly, like those two specific quotes you gave, like those didn't. I didn't even put much thought into them as much as I did that initial thought where he was doing the racial slurs and just saying like all these things are gone now. You're all this. Like that affected me more. Just that removal the removal of identity. I dwelled on that more than and that also. And I know I'm jumbling around here. That kind of set the scene for me. Like okay, so if these people have no identity, then for me, my faith is part of my identity. So if you've already stripped my identity away, then I'm assuming my faith adherence, whatever that is a part of that thing that you're trying to remove to rebuild me. So by the time that those quotes came along, I was already in the status that these people were, these soldiers were moldable and influenceable. I don't know if that's a word. Humans, but I think, but the redeeming factor is the other thing that you have not mentioned yet is when the one character disagrees with the drill sergeant about his faith.
Joker, but not about his faith.
Well,
specifically about the Virgin Mary.
Correct.
Which,
correct.
as
right.
Protestants, we don't believe in the Virgin Mary, Jeff.
Right. Well, she existed,
but she wasn't a virgin.
She was when she had Jesus.
She wasn't when she had his siblings.
Right, but
she's not
the
still
Catholics
a virgin.
Focus on that. That's true. That's true. They're focusing on the pre-James Mary.
Sure.
The pre-Jesus' siblings Mary. But
like Joker could have been a Protestant. The movie doesn't clarify.
Right. But so that moment where he disagreed with the sergeant and was like, "No, sir, like I don't agree with what you just said." I forget the quote, but like that for me was redeeming, like the fact that there is an ability to adhere to pre-existing beliefs. So everything else that came before or after that was kind of negated because those quotes came to teach a lesson, to prove a point, to focus in on some specific sort of standard, not necessarily go, "You don't believe this anymore," ever. It was just in this moment, there is an emotion, there is a fact, there is a lesson right now that's being taught, but that doesn't mean you can't adhere to these things that you came with or are leaving with. So those two quotes for me didn't mean much in the fact that they are if all, be all, end all statements. You know what I mean? Because of that other disagreement that was earlier. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know I didn't quote those right.
No, I think you make a great point. Speaking from my biases, I would say
your silver screen bias.
My silver screen biases?
Not a sponsor.
I would say that it is a sponsor. That's actually what we do here, Jeff. We are silver
screen biases. That.
So speaking from my biases, I would say that the fact that there was a handful of things that made you feel like there was still a separation of church and state.
Right.
That only, in my opinion, emphasizes how subversive the state is at replacing proper authority of Christ.
Yes and no. So
again, my major biases of the state is illegitimate.
Right. This is I adhere to Christianity,
of course,
but
that's a great way to start this paragraph.
With what I believe that we've been given the freedom of choice. People have the ability.
Yeah, like you're a 3-point Calvinist,
right? People have the ability not to adhere to Christianity, and that's okay.
For sure.
That's allowed. That's allowed.
Romans discusses that.
Right. So,
yeah.
So, where am I going with this? If my religious beliefs, whatever that religion was, made it more detrimental to the fact that we didn't have a choice with what we did or did not believe, then I think I'd have more emotion to the fact that there was room for wiggle there. You know what I mean? Like, because we have the freedom, I'm hoping I'm making sense here. Because we have the freedom of choice within Christianity, we can communicate with people that don't believe the same things we believe and not go, I don't know how to word this. I'm losing my train of thought. This may need to.
I will say the separation of church and state was an idea born out of the church, not secularism, right?
Right.
There was in the early colonies churches that didn't have opinions shared by the majority of the colonies. And so they actually worked with Benjamin Franklin for a separation of
Oh,
church
the
and
lightning
state.
guy.
Yeah, the lightning guy. So that the state would not have an official position. Now, with the Virgin Mary discourse, that's an official position presented by the government, and so that's where separation of church and state really comes into play. And I would agree with you if he enforced to the point of discipline that my opinion of the Virgin Mary is what will now be your opinion of the Virgin Virgin
Words are
Mary.
hard. Yeah.
Words are hard. It'd be a different thing.
Yeah.
But again, like I want to say, the subversiveness of this, right? Like, and I know we've talked about this before. I consider the Pledge of Allegiance to be an act of worship, right?
I would agree with you.
And so I see all of this. He instructs them to pray, and they pray to their rifle. Yeah. He tells them about Christmas and about how God has a hard-on for the Marine Corps. In my opinion, the most offensive line in this movie.
Right, but we see him in other aspects. In like, okay, so he uses that Jody line, talking about how like Jody is at home.
He's looking at Connor right now.
Right. Well, no, not. But like
we talk about Jody a lot.
Right. I watched I'm not an expert by any means, but like I watched a YouTube video about that, specifically that Jody line, just how like that is a thing that isn't accurate.
Jody's at home making sure that your significant other is taken care of while you're gone.
Yeah, it's like there's a lot of lines that are said in every subject of life that are embellished or are meant to evoke emotion. And correct me at any time I'm wrong, Connor, please. But like, so like for me, like whether it's sex, whether it's religion, whether it's food, whether it's animals, whether it's military warfare, there's moments where he's invoking an emotion to get you passionate about something. So whether it's religion or the hair on the back of a monkey, he's invoking you to get passionate and to get excited about something. So I didn't take it verbatim, just because like in the end, in that conversation about, I admire you for standing up for what you believe and disagreeing with me, you're going to now be the lead of whatever those terms were. Like that proved to me that like religion is allowed, difference of opinion is allowed, but the point that he was trying to prove was still made because that conversation was had. You know, so I didn't take that as too hard, because just any topic could have been used as a subject of whether you disagree or not. This is standard, or this is firm. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's why none of these quotes struck a nerve, because I knew they were meant to invoke an emotion, but not necessarily go, you have to believe this now or you're gone. Because they prove the exact opposite. When you disagree with me, you got the balls. Okay, you're going to now be in charge of so-and-so.
Sure.
So none of these quotes invoked that, man, I disagree with that. That's wrong. They proved that out.
I strongly disagree, but
that's fine. I won't.
But
I love you.
I don't want to have the last word on this. I'm going to let you have the last word on this.
Connor still.
And now pivot to Connor. Yeah. Connor, those two quotes that I read, how much for you did that feel realistic of your basic training experience?
So when you're in that environment, nothing that they say is without purpose. Every single action that your drill instructor, your drill sergeant does, or everything that they say to you, has a reason, right? And kind of agreeing with what Jeff said over here. It's not that they're telling you can't have these religious beliefs or that you can't have your own opinions, things like that. It's trying to indoctrinate you into this mindset that you are not a civilian anymore. You are now a part of this system that is bigger than you, and you need to get on board with that. As far as the religious aspect is concerned, when I went through, that's not a thing anymore. There's, like I said before, there's equal opportunity programs that we go through where you're allowed to have your own religious beliefs, and they're never going to try and force anything onto you. But as far as, I don't know, you equated it with basically taking that false idol, essentially, right?
Yeah, 100%.
We don't do that exact thing. This is my rifle thing. That's They actually do that in the movie Jarhead. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie.
I have,
I've seen John.
In high school, but
the exact same quote. This is my rifle. There are many like it, but this one is mine. So they do the same thing in Jarhead, right? We don't do that specifically, but we are required to say the soldier's creed pretty much every day until it's ingrained in our heads.
just the title, "The Soldier's Creed," makes me so uncomfortable. But go on.
Where
Can you repeat it for us?
Can you take me higher?
That's
all
not
we
why
do.
I'm uncomfortable, but thank you, Jeff.
It's soldiers that are just standing there singing Creed in the morning. Kryptonite.
Soldiers' Creed.
Kryptonite was our favorite.
Of course.
That's 3 doors down.
Really,
my
personally, Kryptonite is my kryptonite, but
No, so the Soldier's Creed says, I'm an American soldier. I'm a warrior and a member of a team. I serve the people of the United States and live the Army values. I will always place the mission first. I will never accept defeat. I will never quit. I will never leave a fallen comrade. I am disciplined, physically and mentally tough, trained and proficient in my warrior tasks and drills. I will always maintain my arms, my equipment, and myself. I am an expert and I am a professional. I stand ready to deploy, engage, and destroy the enemies of the United States of America in close combat.
both foreign and domestic.
I am a guardian of freedom and the American way of life. I am an American soldier.
I like that better than the Pledge of Allegiance.
On its face, I see nothing objectionable there. The only thing I find objectionable is, presumably, if I'm a Christian serving in the military and the mission is first. If the mission violates my values as a Christian, what is the military's position on that?
So you're speaking
Hypothetically.
kind of like the have you ever seen the movie Hacksaw Ridge?
Yep.
I've not,
Andrew
but I know the
Garfield.
premise of it.
Okay.
Spider-Man doesn't
He was
hurt people.
He
Exactly.
was a Seventh-day Adventist.
Seventh-day
he only eats fish.
Adventist. He was a conscientious objector.
Right.
Um,
But served. So not
Correct.
quite a conscious objector.
so they ask you when you first join if you are a conscientious objector.
Right.
If you answer yes to that question, it bars you from joining.
Really?
That's correct.
That's correct.
Wow.
So actually I got some data on this. Let me see if I can pull it up 1 second here.
When did that, has that always been a thing?
I don't know if it's always been a
Because
thing.
obviously, Hacksaw Ridge, he would have been vetted out then.
Mhm.
So.
But that was a different set of circumstances, right? The country had just been attacked. They were trying to get as many people as possible. They were drafting
it's
people.
circumstantial.
Right.
Okay. Because I'm patriotic to the extent that I've only ever been American. America does mean a lot to me, and I know obviously boundaries are human-made constructs and stuff and there's international things that are also I'm passionate about. But America there are freedoms in America that are not anywhere else.
100%.
So for that reason, I'm proud to be an American. But there are many other reasons why I would not be proud to be American, and that's a different discussion.
Absolutely.
So, oh man, my mind is moving a mile a minute. But yeah, I don't know where I was going with this, but yeah, I lost my train of thought.
Well, allow me to pick up where you left off.
Take it away, Nelson.
So in this movie, they're fighting the Vietnam War, which was the last war that we had conscription for.
Prescription.
Conscription. Now, there are people that disagree with this. My position is similar to the Rothbardian position, Murray Rothbard, who says that conscription is slavery. To define slavery, a form of forced labor in which people are treated as property and are forced to work against their will, usually, but not necessarily, for no pay. So conscription, some people say, is not slavery. The Rothbardian, Murray Rothbard position is that conscription is slavery. You're being forced into occupation as a soldier for pay, but there's no choice in the matter. Okay, it's not voluntary. World War I, approximately 85 to 90% of American soldiers were conscripted.
Drafted? Is that the same?
Same thing.
Okay.
World War II, 40 to 50%. Korean War, 75 to 80%. Vietnam War, 70 to 75%. So roughly 3/4 of the soldiers on screen do not want to fight. They're not voluntarily there. Now, Jeff, we actually know a guy who was drafted for Vietnam War and chose not to fight. He was a conscientious objector. Because he was a conscientious objector, he was sent to assist in the construction of bridges and was stabbed while building bridges several times.
Are you serious?
Now,
Why
that's
am I
the
just
story
hearing
as I remember it. Maybe incorrect.
Well, even just
You are
beyond that, if you're being forced to do something that you don't want to do, outside of just child to parent relationship,
Yeah.
like outside of that, like if you're an adult and you're being made to do something up to the point that it's physical abuse or like there is physical reprimations,
Jail time.
right. That I would even go. That's a form of slavery. So yes, like
Right.
So I'm
So
I'm tracking with
if
you.
you
I'm tracking.
if you refuse the draft, you will be jailed.
Right. I don't agree with the draft.
Now that is in my understanding of slavery, that fits the bill. Is that comparable to chattel slavery of the South during the 1800s? Absolutely not.
Right.
But there
It's
are
a different-
lots.
Right.
There are lots of
Right.
forms of slavery.
Yeah. It's not.
Okay.
It's not. Yeah. Correct.
So,
To separate that. Yeah.
given that context, the religious overtones here, for me, are incredibly offensive. These people don't want to be there to begin with, right? It's one thing if you are voluntarily joining the military, which, I mean, that alone I have my issues with, as we've discussed, Connor, because of who it is for, not what it is for. It's one thing if you're there and they say, pray, and then you repeat, "This is my rifle." It's a different thing entirely if you're there involuntarily. I have such serious issues with this. For me, similar to Connor, the first half of this movie is way more important than the second half. Yes, Kubrick does do a great job in the second half of illustrating the futility of war, but the first half is about venerating, worshiping the state, worshiping war. There's a brilliant, he died at the age of 32, a gentleman named Randolph Bourne. He was
I've seen his movies.
different Bourne. He wrote an essay called "The State" that was published after he died. He was a dissenter to World War I. He coined the phrase, "War is the health of the state." Now, for some people, that means when there is war, the state, the people of the state, right, the civilians, they unify in a unique way. We definitely saw that after 9/11, for example.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely true. What he was saying when he wrote that, though, is that because of that unification, because of that centralization of power, the state gains more power. The Leviathan State is an essay that really kind of highlights this. Right, like 9/11, we saw the Patriot Act signed. And now the Patriot Act is being used against the very people that championed it to begin with.
And then
Right.
you get the Sokovia Accords as well.
Yeah, in a totally fictional universe of the Avengers.
Yeah.
So like
Sorry, it's hard for me to.
as passionate as I am about economics, I'm way more passionate about war. Right? Like, for me, this movie highlights everything that, for me, is the problem with the state.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with the centralized government.
Can I ask you a question? That, like, if we step outside of this movie
Yeah.
and 2023 and what our current political climate is, if you're reading the Bible and you're reading depictions of warfare within the Bible, how do you feel about that? Because I'm getting your perspective of modern warfare, not the game, but like just like where we're at now as a country and stuff. But like God is, I mean, it's a commandment. Like murder is a sin, but like, but fighting for what you believe in and standing up for your belief is not a sin. And if it means actively defending yourself to the point of breaking skin, it's not okay, but that's a logical outcome. What does your views change when you're looking from modern warfare to biblical warfare? Like, because like war is something like, obviously in an ideal world, no one would have to enter counter war.
Right.
Like a perfect war would mean that Connor would never have to enlist and fight for a nation and protect us because we don't need it. That's a perfect situation.
That's actually a subcontext of this movie is the inevitability of war.
Right. It's like, but because there are issues between us, not just us in America, but us as a globe. We need people to fight for us and protect us.
Okay, well,
So what's your perspective
you actually
on
asked
biblical?
two different
Right,
questions.
what's your
So let me
perspective on
answer first the
biblical
biblical.
warfare? Yeah.
And the biblical is going to be very unsatisfying
To who?
to everyone.
Oh, savory.
Unless you are a devout Christian, in which case it'll be slightly more satisfying, but if you're non-Christian, very unsatisfying. I do not presume to know the mind of God.
Okay, that's valid. Yeah.
And so, as a Christian, anything God does is by its nature good. Not just allowable, but morally good. And so if he commands a war, it is good. I don't necessarily understand, and in many times disagree, but it is, by its nature, good. To a non-Christian, that is an unsatisfying answer. I understand,
Right.
and that's just the way it is.
You'd be
Right.
super popular in the Crusades, by the way.
I disagree strongly with the Crusades, but that's a conversation for another time. And for a non-Christian, that's a very unsatisfying answer. I get that, and I get why it's unsatisfying. Right? When there was a time where I was an unconvinced Christian, to put it lightly, right? Probably not even a Christian by some people's standards. And for me, that would have been a very unsatisfying, unhelpful answer. If you're a Christian, anything God does is by nature good, and so the wars he instructed are good. The American wars have not been, to my knowledge, instructed by the immutable word of God.
Right.
All of them?
To my knowledge.
I mean, it's valid. Yeah. I don't know if we can fact check that.
If you can find me evidence to the contrary, I'm open to it, but to
Right.
my knowledge, right? And I get that's an unsatisfying answer,
Right.
but that is the answer.
Right. And obviously I'm not trying to compare Vietnam to spiritual warfare. But obviously there's a lot of battles
Or
within the
or even
scripture
outside of spiritual
that are
warfare
just-
to reclaiming Israel,
Right.
right? But despite not intending to, that is what the comparison you made, and
Right,
I don't
correct,
think it's
correct.
an unfair comparison.
Yeah. Because war is war is war is war, right? Like
In theory,
it looks different, but like
it's also a war.
person versus person a battle is a type of war. It can be, and again, Connor, correct me if I'm here to be corrected. Like we can have internal wars, we can have wars within ourselves.
Yeah.
It's like a war is a state of mind, but at some point there can be casualties to war. Right.
Without fail.
Right. It's
There will
just
be
at some point,
casualties
like
of war.
so it's just where is there a line to where this is justifiable? Whether it's composed to a nation, a defined border, or a spiritual border, or is are the wars that we've had as a nation valid? I don't know. Do I want to say that?
Yeah, I mean,
I would say that the last righteous war is the way that I would put it.
Yeah.
Would be World War II.
Okay.
And even that wasn't like we didn't get into World War II because we had a desire to stop Hitler from
Right.
doing what he wanted to do. Because we
we
were
were
neutral.
unaware.
Right.
Well, we weren't even unaware. We were neutral
We were
in that
observing.
war. We would send weapons and things to England like
Yeah.
we're doing now with Ukraine. But we were fairly neutral in that war until Japan decided
Well,
to bomb us.
hold on. I didn't want to get into this, but you just said something that's factually inaccurate, so I have to get involved here. We sent equipment supplies to the Allies and very explicitly denied equipment supplies to the Axis. We were involved.
I'm not saying we weren't involved.
I know. Well,
we weren't on the battlefield.
we didn't have boots on the ground, but what happened at Pearl Harbor was A, not unprovoked, and B, not there is evidence to say that FDR was aware it might happen and chose to take specific actions to defend specific ships and allow others to sink.
I'm not saying that we weren't involved in the war.
Sure.
The same way that I wouldn't say that we're not involved in the Ukraine war today.
That's a spicy position.
I'm just saying that the government will tell you that we were neutral
Our official position is that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Until
publicized
we were
position.
attacked. And
Right.
at that point, Germany and the Axis powers, because Japan attacked us, had no choice but to declare war on us as well.
Right.
And that's
Right.
why we got involved in that war.
Not
I-
that I do want to clarify. When I say that Japan was provoked, I do not in any way justify their actions. It's still deplorable. But to say that it happened in a vacuum is inaccurate.
I'm not saying it happened in a vacuum.
I know you're not, but there are some that do.
I'm just saying that, in my opinion,
Right.
that's the last war that I can look at historically that the U.S. has been involved in and say there was a good reason to be involved in that war,
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
right? Even 9/11, like, I understand us being involved in any type of conflict in the Middle East because of what happened there.
Mhm.
But the official position of the military and the government was to fight terror. It was the war on terror, right? And then we went into Afghanistan and we fought the Taliban.
And the war on drugs and poverty and AIDS have gone so well.
Yeah,
Why not
exactly.
add terror to
we
the
went
list?
we went into Afghanistan for 20 years
Mhm.
and fought the Taliban when really it was the Saudis that funded 9/11, but we're
Right.
allies with the Saudis. So we weren't really doing anything about 9/11 other than killing Osama bin Laden in 2012.
Allegedly.
That's right.
Sorry, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Now here's a fun, like a little thing to chew on. Like, can you have a military excursion, a battle, without it being called a war? Like, are there,
100%.
are there,
Vietnam was
for
police
sure.
action.
but that was also called Vietnam War.
No, it's the Vietnam police action.
Connor, like, can you? At what point does it go from military boots on the ground action, gunfire, to where now it's a war?
We do that all the time,
Okay.
even today.
Okay.
Right now, the war on terror is over.
Right.
We
Correct.
withdrew from Afghanistan. That's not a thing anymore.
Right.
We still have troops on the ground in Iraq and in Syria
Mhm.
that are fighting ISIS, a terror organization.
Right. And there's
Right.
there's action
Mhm.
taking place and stuff, and there are
They're straight shooting at each other,
Right.
and
but it's not a war. It's just they're just some battles.
exactly
Okay,
presidents
Okay.
all the way back, from Bush on have enacted drone strikes
Gotcha.
on leaders of terror organizations across the world.
And that question was just me being ignorant because I am outside of this knowledge.
And,
Okay.
and those aren't considered wars. A
Gotcha.
war is when one organization, a full-on political organization, declares war
Mhm.
on another political
Okay.
organization.
Okay, I track with you. Gotcha. Man, I am loving this conversation, and I hope you if you and I will pause and say, like, if you guys who are listening, we want to have conversation online, like chime in, put in Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, like let us know what you're thinking, whether you agree or disagree. Like we are, this is an open discussion. We are here for all sides of the spectrum and stuff. We just want to have this conversation. So respectfully, of course. But we can have different sides and disagree, but we can be respectful about it. So but please let us know what your thoughts are about this conversation. I'm loving this. Like this is so I'm so engulfed in this, by the way. This is incredible.
I also would like to say that I don't think that this movie is an anti-war movie. I know that you brought this up earlier in what you were saying, that Kubrick was trying to push his position of being anti-war.
More anti-violence than anti-war.
I don't
But again,
I don't see
that's-
this as an
that-
anti-war movie.
That's from my sample size of 2 Kubrick movies, both of which I've watched for this podcast.
Wait till you get to 2001: A Space Odyssey.
And I'm glad you mentioned that because, like, and this is just a little quick blurb here. Like, when we were talking about Kubrick's religious perspective, I just did a quick Google, and I guess there's a lot more themes of religious. And I've never seen that movie. It is on the list though, so we will eventually get to it. But there's a lot more religious parallels in that movie than there was in this. So he was not a Christian, to what I can see on the interwebs, but there are a lot more faith-based, metaphysical themes in that 2001: Space Odyssey. So this conversation will continue, at least on the Kubrick topic of his perspective on life and stuff. So just a foreshadowing.
I think that there are themes in the movie that are anti-war, for sure, but I don't think that was his goal, right? Like,
Right.
even the name of the movie, Full Metal Jacket, Do you guys know anything about how he came up with the name for that?
I mean,
Well, it shows up in the end of the first half.
right. I mean, because Pyle says that, right? Yeah. So that's the first. I mean, outside of knowing the name of this movie, when Pyle said that, that's the first time I've heard it used in a sentence, to my knowledge.
So Full Metal Jacket, this movie was based off of a book that he read. I forget what it was called, but in the book, they don't mention Full Metal Jacket once. And the reason why he named it that, at least as far as anyone can tell, is that within the Geneva Convention, which the United States is part of, it states that the only ammunition that you're allowed to use is a full metal jacket round. Because a full metal jacket it's essentially a bullet that's coated in copper.
Okay.
And it will generally go through a person and create an exit wound. Whereas like a hollow point or a soft metal or a soft jacketed round will fragment within a person. It's the reason why police use hollow points.
Okay.
Because when they're trying to take down somebody, they don't want to have to worry about that round going through them and then hitting something past the person that they're shooting at.
Right.
In war, you don't want that fragmentation because it creates a wound that's almost impossible to fix. Right? So the Geneva Convention states that you have to use full metal jacket rounds. And Kubrick was essentially commenting on the absurdity of having rules for warfare with the name of this movie.
Wow. I had no idea. Wow. That's incredible. This is great.
I've got something else out of this movie that I want to discuss, and I'd love to hear your opinion on, Connor and Jeff. So Joker, when he leaves basic or boot camp, he becomes media correspondent for the military. They have a specific title for it, but there's a conversation between him and Rafterman. Rafterman says, "You know what really pisses me off about these people? We're supposed to be helping them, and they crap all over us every chance they get. I just can't figure that out." And then Joker says, "Don't take it too hard, Rafterman. It's just business." And of course, moments later, we've got their boss saying, "We run two stories here." And he details the two different types of stories. By limiting it to two different types of stories, this is very obviously propaganda. I watched a documentary after I watched this movie today. The documentary is titled Theaters of War. All branches of the military and the CIA have specific budgets for assisting in media and entertainment. To quote the military on the movie Lone Survivor, support for entertainment feature films like this reach far greater audiences than any single news media story about the event. Audiences going to see the film will voluntarily sit through a 2-hour infomercial about the participation of Army Special Forces in one of our many joint missions. It will also show the professionalism and dedication of our soldiers. Basically, the way this works is if a movie production company wants to make a movie that features the military, say Iron Man or Transformers, they'll approach the branches responsible, show them the script, and those branches will go through the script and say, "Hey, we'd love to work with you, but you're going to have to change this, and this, or not use our equipment and our personnel." Now, in any other voluntary exchange, that's a trade that I think is very reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason that I consider this voluntary exchange different is because the military is funded with involuntary tax dollars expropriated from the civilian class. This movie, Full Metal Jacket, was not produced with the assistance of the U.S. military. And that's because it highlights unprofessionalism. It highlights hazing practices in boot camp. It's actually why I was surprised that the Marines post-service, not posthumously, but post-service, promoted Gunnery Sergeant
Lee Ermey.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. It portrays him in a negative light, and as a result, portrays drill sergeants in a negative light. Famously, Jerry Bruckheimer. Who's the director that did the Transformer movies?
Michael Bay.
Michael Bay.
Michael Bay.
So Jerry Bruckheimer and Michael Bay are both big directors that the military loves to work with. always portrays them in positive light. So Iron Man, Transformers, Saving Private Ryan, Top Gun Maverick, all produced with assistance from military budget and surplus, including military personnel. And then those movies are actually aired first for personnel before they're aired for the general public. And that actually provides viral marketing because, for example, people on base get to see the movie first and tell their family, hey, you should see this when it comes out. It's very good. And the Air Force is not at all quiet about how productive Top Gun and Top Gun Maverick were for driving Air Force and recruitment.
That was actually the Navy, but yeah.
Tomato. Jeff,
Guilty.
your thoughts. I'm sure you can predict my thoughts.
That specific thing, I guess I'm neutral about. I guess I don't really have much to say about that. I don't necessarily. Yeah. No. So I don't have anything to add to that. I don't disagree.
Does it bother you, or do you not care at all?
It bothers me. I would compare it to like a mosquito bite. Like it's something like you can't do anything about. Like I can't. Jeffrey can't do anything about it. So like it bothers me to enough to where it's like, okay, eventually I just won't think about it anymore because it's out. Like it's not something I have any control or any factor in. But it is something that I don't necessarily see it going the way I would if I could manipulate it, I would manipulate it differently, but like I can't. It's like I don't dwell on it. You know, does that make sense? Like it's
if you had your druthers, your tax dollars wouldn't be spent on that, but you feel like you are unable to affect change there.
Right. Like I give to Caesar what is Caesar's, but I can't tell Caesar what to do with his money, you know? Right? Mm-hmm. I mean, and I use the money I can dictate for what I think is important and pertinent, but I'm not about to worry about that because it's inevitable. It's, it's Thanos, but like, it's like what I'm going to put my focus and my time and my effort in is the money where I can positively manipulate. I can positively influence with. I'm pro government. I'm pro military. I'm pro. I get just broadly, like obviously if we get to fine tooth combs, there's things I disagree and agree with, but like I'm glad there's a government. I'm glad there's a police force in general protecting my well-being. Not specifically Jeffrey, but the idea of Jeffrey and the idea of where we live in the town, in the city, in the state. So I know without my tax dollars, things like that would be harder to come by. Not impossible. There could be other ways to have these types of situations and these types of constructs without having taxes. But either way, I'm glad military, police, medical, town governors, like again, some of them may not be great people. Some of them may be. But the idea of what they represent and the altruistic idea of what a governor, a mayor, a president, the idea of what they represent, I'm all for. That doesn't mean that they're doing it well. But either way, we asked for a king all the way back in the Old Testament. We as a humanity, we asked for kings.
And I think it was pretty clear in the Old Testament that was a bad thing that we asked for that.
Right,
to go on.
Right. But Jesus later then said, give to Caesar what is Caesar's.
And?
Finish it for me.
And to God what is God.
Right. And I do both of those.
What is not God's?
I don't know how to answer that. I don't know. Because everything's God's. But the idea that us as humanity asked for leadership, for rulership, there in itself lies a systematic construct.
Okay.
And God acknowledges it. Jesus acknowledged it and goes, okay, you wanted it? There's a price to pay for it. Yeah. And that price is monetary, physical, emotional, relational, sexual, habitual. It's all the
Sounds
all
a
the
lot like
yules.
the curse.
Right.
But
Right.
I'm going to let you have the last word on this, Jeff.
No,
But I will say, I want to say one last thing before I let you have the last word on it. And then you're going to have the last word on it. And we'll pivot to Connor.
You're good.
Because I am the extremist of the two of us. And so I'd like to have the more centrist view wrap up.
Yeah, that's fine.
Would you agree that security and defense is of more importance than a soft drink?
Absolutely.
Of course.
Okay, yeah.
Coca-Cola seems to do very well at marketing and providing and facilitating soft drinks that are in very high demand. And how much more high demand would security and defense be? And why is it that we can't handle that through a market solution? Why is it that it must be provided through a monopolized, centralized solution? That really comes to the fundamentals of this. It's not that I think that police and defense shouldn't be. It's that I think that they're too important to be monopolized. Now, you don't have to answer that if you don't have one. If that's something you want to chew on, that's fine. But I'm going to allow you the last word before we pivot to Connor and get his opinion on the propagandistic side of these films.
No, I appreciate that. Like, and I don't disagree with you in the fact that it's become something as simple as our humanity's safety, the safety of our physical and well-being, and the longevity of us as a humankind, not necessarily even us as an American humankind, but just as a humanity, has become something that's become a business. We mentioned earlier in this episode, if you're still tracking with us, thank you.
Probably in the last episode, I think
But
this
like,
might be a two-part.
Right. But the bureaucracy that it takes, even for the people that are fighting for us, that are in this construct that we're talking about, how even they have to wait a while to get the needs that they need to go.
Bureaucracy that we don't typically see in
Right.
free market.
Well,
solutions.
this is the reason why I'm against socialized medicine, by the way.
Right. So
I've experienced it.
My issue is not
Let's
with
give the VA solution of medicine to everyone.
So my issue is not with the constructs. It's how the constructs have, and I say this because obviously this is not the heart of everyone that's in these situations.
Of course.
So I speak from a broad term. But like, it seems from my perspective that there is a lack of genuineness and authenticness, and it becomes a business transaction. If we could somehow remove that aspect and go, okay, humanity and life and the value of a breath comes first, and we'll worry about the dollar, we'll worry about the business, the marketing, the advertise, whatever, we'll worry about that secondly, but the life comes first, then I think it'd be different. But I would agree that there are so many loopholes, there are so many hoops, there are so many things that have started that they dictate, not even a specific person, but the rules that we as humans have created are dictating the now humans that created those said rules. We've become entrapped in this system of what could be very functional to something that's choking us out. Does that make sense? I blacked out there.
That makes so much sense. I am going to honor my promise of letting you have the last
you're
word.
fine. I don't need the last word. And I'm really eager to see what Connor has to say. I want to believe in the government, and as someone who is an American citizen, a part of me has to believe in it.
I also am an American citizen, and I would say you don't.
Right, but and again, and I know this isn't everyone's perspective, and I don't need this to be everyone's perspective. I would like it to be everyone's perspective. I don't need it to be. I do adhere to a higher calling. I do believe that God will have the final word, and when things don't go my way, I get frustrated. I get pissed off. I get sad. I get emotional, and I think about my daughter. I think about my wife. I think about my parents. But in that final, or in those moments, I go, this isn't in my in my belief, this isn't the end. And this, whatever we have manipulated, whatever we have constructed, whatever we have built is smaller than what I can even imagine is happening beyond me.
Absolutely.
So like,
I would absolutely agree with that.
yeah. So like yeah, this, okay. I'm going to end there.
Sure.
I'll stop there.
Because you and I could go on this for hours.
Right.
Connor,
I don't know how to follow this.
I want to hear your thoughts as a serviceman. How do you feel about the propagandistic side of military entertainment?
Honestly, I don't think that military movies have that much of an influence over people. I think that if you're going to join the military in any aspect, right, that you were either predisposed to that or you already had that idea in your head. And I don't think that a movie is going to change that for you.
It is quantifiable though that recruitment after Top Gun came out it's the best for the Air Force it's ever been.
Well,
or
that's
Navy or whatever branch it was.
That's a statistic to a poll that you had no hand in, though. Like I don't believe anything that's posted anywhere.
And that's also a very
to a truthful fact. So like that could be a fact somewhere, but like I would almost agree with I agree more with Connor. But I know people who've been in the military.
Okay,
that have not manipulated by any of that thing. They're just like, yeah, military is what I like. From 5th grade, they're like, yeah, I'm going to be in the military. Like,
what additional explanation could there be then for the spike in recruitment following Top Gun?
According to the statistic that you read.
According to the statistics of recruitment rates before and after Top Gun.
Right. I mean,
but how do you know those weren't people that were already thinking about it? And then they saw the movie and were like, well, you know what? People that joined for all different reasons, right? And if you look at statistics now, you'll see that recruitment for the military is at its lowest point that it's ever been.
Yeah.
It's hard to get people to join right now. But people join for all different reasons.
Don't worry. We're about to have a recession. Your numbers will be great.
That's right.
I'm sorry, that's too dark.
People join the military for all different reasons.
Yeah.
There's people that join because they feel like it's a higher calling and because they want to defend people that can't defend themselves, but there's also people that join because they know if they do 4 years they get free college.
Right. And there's people that join because they want to legally kill people.
Exactly.
That is valid.
I haven't met a lot of those people,
but they exist. Yeah.
So I don't think that just because
I like that you didn't say you haven't met none of those people.
No, I've definitely met some of those people.
Yeah.
But I don't want to say that just because Michael Bay makes a movie with the Air Force in it and Josh Duhamel is out there running and gunning and doing stuff that the Air Force doesn't actually do.
The only thing Josh Duhamel made me want to do is do sit-ups. That dude's a stud.
And did it? Did it make you do sit-ups?
For like a day.
Wow.
I did.
That's a commitment.
I did like 10. Yeah. Anyways.
I just don't think that that's influencing people to walk into the recruiting station.
The movie about Julia Child didn't make me want to go into a kitchen and cook a bruschetta. Like whatever, a brisket or whatever. Like so, like
you got stuck in the bees of your recipe book.
For the people that, and I say this respectfully, for the people that can be manipulated just by a form of entertainment, there's a bigger issue there.
And it's linked below the documentary. I strongly recommend it.
I'll watch
Theaters of War. I'll send it to you, Jeff.
I'll watch it.
If you went and saw Top Gun when it was in theaters, as you left cinema, outside of that exit were military recruiters. They had their best recruitment in months or years, really. Their numbers spiked.
Recruiters were outside of theaters?
Yes, for Top Gun. And I believe they
all
did
theaters?
I don't know. I wasn't alive when Top Gun was made.
Oh, okay. You're talking the first one.
Top Gun. I know that they did it again in select theaters for Top Gun Maverick. So, like, I get that there were probably people already intending to enlist. 100%. I even concede that there were people predisposed to enlisting and this motivated them too. But that
could be the linchpin.
If you have a spike and then it returns to normal, there needs to be an explanation for the spike. And if you say this movie only motivated what already existed, fine. I'm open to that interpretation, but you need to explain what caused that pre-existent motivation prior to the movie. I think that these movies are very, very effective propaganda. The things that we see in like Top Gun, for example, are way more lighthearted, way more like hero's story,
Way more volleyball.
way more sexy volleyball,
Yeah.
as Jeff said. Jeff really drove home the sexy point there.
Did I?
Like Top Gun's a very different feel from this movie. If you watch this movie,
It did make. I've seen the first Top Gun. It did make some of the aspects of that lifestyle attractive.
Yeah.
But never once did I go, man. Yeah, I'm only one person, but like I would have had to have thought about military before going into that movie for me to leave that theater and go, okay, I'm gonna do it.
Sure,
I'm gonna.
sure.
That could not have been the initial thought for them. And if it was, I
Absolutely.
want to see the rate of how many of those people stayed within. Like commit.
Oh,
like,
what was the wash rate of those people?
Right. Like how many of
Yeah.
those people were able to make it through basic?
That's a great question. That's
Right.
a great question because my point isn't that these are people that never would have considered it before and then enlisted. My point is that there's people that, like Ross and Connor, both considered enlisting. Only Connor did.
So Connor watched Con Air.
Yes.
Act of valor, actually.
Had there been
I've seen that one.
Had
Yes.
there been a Top Gun equivalent for our generation, would Ross have enlisted? Maybe we don't know because you can't counterfactual.
Right.
But my point is, like, there's a lot of people that consider it and choose not to for whatever reason. And then a movie like Top Gun, which is tax funded, which I have an issue with, bringing people in the military, like I have an issue with that. Like, well, let me ask you this, Connor: do you disagree that it's propaganda?
No,
Okay.
but I think there's military propaganda everywhere.
Everything on a screen is propaganda.
There's TikToks that are propaganda for people to join the military.
That's true.
I work for the coffee industry, and I would say some of the publicity I see is propaganda. So yeah, everything has an aspect of propaganda to it. I would agree
Fair.
with that 100%.
Fair.
And
All
I,
marketing is
and
propaganda.
I believe in the power of marketing. I'm not saying it can't have an influence. I'm just saying like it can't be the catalyst. If it is,
I
there's
agree with that.
yeah. If
I
it,
don't know
if
that
it
I agree with
is,
that, but I think it's a fair point.
here's the thing: like the Passion of the Christ. If we're going back to the religion side of things, the Passion of the Christ was not a catalyst for people joining the faith.
I don't know that that's true.
I mean, again, I am making an assumption. I am making an assumption.
Yeah.
But like, it had to have been something that people had. Like, I would assume. Again, people aren't going to go watch the Passion of the Christ just for a fun entertainment value.
Yeah.
So like, they're leaving the theater or they're entering that theater going, I have some faith questions. I'm going to see what this is about. I have some military questions. I may go see what Con Air is about, or not Con Air.
Not a military.
That's a different air movie.
Yeah,
Hey,
that
Top Gun. There
that
we go.
Classic military movie,
Con
Con
Air,
Air.
yeah. So yeah, so just like there is power in media, but I would if media is the linchpin in any decision you're making, I would second guess and question the strongholds you have in your own personal choice making.
Fair, but you are giving too much credit to the logical steps involved there. Effective marketing is subconscious.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't mention it earlier when I was reading through the different snippets that were
Love snippets.
to me evidence that the state replaces Christ and God. I've got a couple more here that I just want to go through real quick.
Okay.
Joel Sargent says, Private Pyle, you are definitely born again hard. Hell, I may even allow you to serve as a rifleman in my beloved corps. Now, that's very specifically borrowing terms from Christian culture.
Born again. Yes. Yeah.
Then later we have, and this is in the second half of the movie. I don't know what his rank is. Connor, maybe you can provide some context here. When the media correspondents in the military arrive at the bunker where the bodies are covered in lime, and the man comes, I don't know what his rank is, comes to talk to them. Do you know what his rank is? The second guy that they talk to.
I don't know.
Okay. Well, he says, and this line
He
is,
definitely has a rank.
he
So
has
I can
some
confirm- I
rank,
can
at least
confirm that.
private.
Yeah.
This line is very funny to me, but also very emblematic of the moral friction that Christians in the military will experience.
Mhm.
All I've ever asked my men is to obey my orders as they would the word of God.
Oh, that's a colonel.
He's a colonel?
Mhm.
That line for me is like, man, it hits me like a ton of bricks.
It's powerful. I mean, because like he's inciting the power that people that adhere to that, like that know the power of withholding that, like I mean, whether that colonel adheres to that specifically personally, but like,
I don't think he would invoke it unless he did.
that's not true. I can
In
talk
that-
football with someone not knowing any football stats. I don't have to adhere to a sports lifestyle
I know, but I'm
to
saying
use that in
The
communication.
term "obey it as they would the word of God" that has context to it that I don't think secular people are going to use.
Right, but secular people know what that means.
I know, but it's not in their cultural lexicon. It's not in their shorthand.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Connor, your thoughts?
I have none.
And that's really all I have left as far as like insight for this movie.
Okay.
If you guys have things you want to bring out, I know Connor, you took a lot of notes here.
I did. My main thing is just the duality of man thing.
Yeah,
That
it's big in this movie.
I don't think it is.
You really?
I don't think the duality of man is as big as people think it is in this
It's
movie.
there.
It's
but
there.
You're not thinking it. You're saying it's not the.
I think people focus on it too much because of that interaction with the colonel where he asks him why he's wearing the peace pin, but he's also got Born to Kill on his head.
Right.
And
So you think it's a red herring?
not necessarily a red herring. I think that there's things in this movie that allude to the duality of man, but I don't think it's the overarching theme.
Yeah.
Because Joker replies to the colonel saying that it's a duality of man referencing Jungian philosophy. And I think people focus too much on that. So Carl Jung was a philosopher who believed that all people are inherently bad and that the only reason people are good is because they choose to be, but they're born bad people. Nietzsche had the same philosophies.
And John Calvin.
I don't believe that. I personally believe more closer to, I think you talked about it in your Spirited Away podcast. The I don't remember what his name is. The guy who wrote the Gulag Archipelago.
Yeah. Alexander Solzhenitsyn.
Him.
Spell that.
No.
He in that book or whatever you want to call it because it's huge.
It's a compendium of knowledge.
Sure is.
He posits that people they have this line in their heart where there's good and evil in everyone, and they get that choice, right? They have to fight for whatever they believe in.
Mm-hmm.
And I fall more into that. And so I don't believe that this movie is showing that these people lost all humanity and are now on the bad side of things where they're only committing evil acts because somebody told them to. I look at it more as they took away all of their individuality, and the scene that really hammers that home is the very last one where they shoot the sniper and then Joker has to decide whether or not he's going to listen to Animal Mother and let her suffer and die or put her out of her misery.
Right.
And at the end of that, he shoots her and then they march off singing the Mickey Mouse song.
Which they didn't face
M-O-U-S-E.
legal repercussions for, even though they weren't published by Disney.
I didn't know that. But I look at that more as him losing the last bit of innocence that he had, which is why you're following Joker throughout the movie. It's why he's the protagonist, right? Because in the boot camp scenes, they allow him to maintain a bit of his individuality, whereas the rest of them are all losing that to become part of the big machine. And he gets to maintain a little bit of that as the Joker, as the person who's willing to stand up to the drill instructor. And then at the very end, when he shoots that Vietnamese soldier, he loses all of his innocence and becomes part of the larger group, which is why you see him at the end singing the song that the rest of them are singing as they march. So I don't look at it as the duality of man. It's more the loss of innocence.
Him becoming a singularity.
Right.
Yeah.
He's finally conforming to the rest of the group.
Wow. I wouldn't disagree with that. From specifically the perspective of the Joker, yeah. Man, Kubrick has redeemed himself.
Yeah, 100%. Anything else?
I think that's pretty much it.
Connor, you and I both read The Things They Carried in high school. Jeff, did you read that book?
I don't even know that title. I'm looking it up right now though because I'm going to read it.
Connor, do you remember it?
The things that
I remember aspects of it.
Tim O'Brien.
That's right. So it is unclear whether or not this book was a compilation of first-hand experiences, stories told to him, or complete fiction. And that's on purpose. but it is a series of short stories about the Vietnam War. And one of the lines in this movie that we never really discussed, but we touched on right before recording, one of the lines in the book that recurs with the movie, I should say, is don't send men to war and expect them to come back speaking, expect them not to curse, is effectively the line. You send these men off to war to witness and contribute to mass slaughter. Don't be shocked that they use strong language. I'm segueing into our final closing questions here. The strong language in this movie, I think, is entirely appropriate given the context.
It didn't seem out of place.
It didn't seem out of place.
From my zero in personal experience in military. Yeah.
I don't think you could make this movie and have it be PG-13. It has to be rated R.
Right.
Now, as a rated R movie, this is undoubtedly less graphic than other Kubrick movies that I've seen. The other Kubrick movie I've seen.
It's less sexually graphic. I would say it's more bloody.
Yeah.
There's
and the language is certainly stronger.
There's
than
more
Clockwork
casualties
Orange,
in this movie. I mean, not even the war aspect, but just the suicide aspect. Specifically the suicide aspect in that they show it. So I would say that's more graphic than Clockwork. Clockwork was sexually graphic. I mean, like
sexually graphic. Yeah. The language was cleaner in the Clockwork Orange than it was in this.
The language was cleaner in Clockwork Orange. Yeah, correct. Yes.
The language in this movie, while shocking, I found to be almost pedestrian. Like, very quickly it becomes like, oh, this is just what the movie's going to be. Like, it loses its shock value almost immediately.
It's become a stereotype. Like, I've seen, I'm going to list just a couple. I've seen The Hurt Locker, Jarhead. The one other one was mentioned not too long ago.
Iron Man.
No, not Iron Man.
Transformers.
No, stop it.
Act of Valor?
Act of Valor. I've seen that one.
That was close.
There's some other military movies I've seen that depict pre-battle conversation between a sergeant and the soldiers. And
Avatar.
Nailed it. Yeah, it's like yeah, there was nothing in this movie outside of some of the Kubrick directed scenes that evoke specific emotions, or like the military depictions. None of that was surprising.
It felt authentic.
Yeah, absolutely. The language, the dialogue, there was nothing in it. I'm like, man, it was unsettling, but not unauthentic from what I know.
Connor, to your experience in the military, was the dialogue in this movie authentic?
Absolutely. We swear all the time.
Yeah.
It's almost unheard of to hear a sentence that's spoken to you without at least one or two F-bombs dropped.
Go ahead, sir.
Well, I was going to say, are people of religious convictions within the military, is their language any cleaner?
That's what my question was.
Not really.
Okay.
No.
I mean, I'm a potty mouth, so.
Yeah, I would say not really. It's just kind of
part of the culture.
Yeah, you accept immediately. Like you get to basic training and your drill sergeants are swearing at you, and it's just kind of what you get used to.
Do you ever have interactions with your drill sergeants outside? Okay, so I'm specifically the boot camp session. We see those interactions with Pyle and Joker and Gunny Sergeant Hartman, but then like, does that relationship ever change outside of boot or basic? Like, do you ever become buddies, or like is there ever the ability to become equals with them?
With the drill sergeant?
With the drill sergeant, and it's never is it always just yelling, or is there ever that moment where it's like, okay, hey, let's talk natural talk?
Well, for the most part, you never see them again after that experience is over, because you're there for 10 weeks. And then
that's it.
You move on.
Okay.
And they go off. They do their time as the drill sergeant or the drill instructor or whatever. So and then they go off to their unit, and you usually won't see them again. The only experience that I've had with that was my senior drill sergeant for AIT, which is the training you go to after basic to learn your job. He came to Fort Bragg, and during COVID, because I'm a medic, I was tasked out with vaccinating people. Mm-hmm. Because the Army forced vaccinations. That's a different topic. But
Part 3 of the podcast.
he had to come in and get vaccinated, and I vaccinated him, and he didn't even recognize me. They go through so many people, like
Right.
because they do so many different cycles of
Okay.
basic training and AIT that they don't remember you. You might remember them, but they don't remember you.
And I guess the reason for asking is like you see that character of Gunny Sargent, like, and like it's so vibrant and colorful and like it's hard to see him just talking in a plain voice going, "Hey, how was your day today?" You know, like and then I mean it's funny, but there's also that like I want to say just the word colorful. Like it's just like to see them talk in any other manner, you're like, okay, now something's off. Like you're broken. Like just I just didn't know like if it, but it does make sense because you do go somewhere else. Like, so do your relationship with your upper officers? It's not that same type of yelling relationship, right? Okay. It's more of
that's a training environment type of thing.
Okay.
That's specifically basic training or boot camp. You're in that environment. They're trying to break you down. They're trying to remove all aspects of civilian life
Right.
to try and build you up as a soldier, Marine, whatever. Once you've graduated from that and you're officially part of the system, for lack of a better term, every now and then, like if you get in trouble or something, like you do something stupid, you're going to get yelled at.
Right.
You might get what we call smoked, which is where they make you do some sort of physical exercise like push-ups as a form of corrective training.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, the senior NCOs that I deal with and the officers that I deal with, it's just like a normal conversation. I'll walk in and be like, "Hey, how was your weekend?" You know, like just a normal work environment.
Cool. That's it's so foreign to me. So I'm so intrigued by that. Okay.
You want to do wrap-up questions?
Yeah. I mean I've expressed all my thoughts on this movie. This has been great. Yeah. So anything else before I get to these final questions?
Connor, it has been an absolute pleasure
This
to have
is-
you on.
I hope I didn't take up too much of your time here.
I honestly, you can have more of it, Connor, if you'd like. I've enjoyed this.
I want to have you on again for another military movie.
There's more. Saving Private Ryan.
There's so many military movies.
There's
in the top
more.
250.
There's more. And I've never seen Saving Private Ryan.
Really?
Me either.
I've not.
You guys have never seen
I
that's a movie where guys that went through D-Day said that they had such a visceral reaction to it because it was so accurate to what they had to deal with. Like the opening scene of that movie is just insane.
I'm familiar with it, and I know my parents have watched it. And I know I've would come down from my bedroom, and it would be on but I've never watched it front to back. Like I'm familiar with it, but I've not seen it. Yeah, and I know it says on the top 250, and there's other 1917s on the top 250.
Yeah, I love that movie.
That one I've seen that one. So that one cinematically, that one's beautiful.
Yeah,
Like I could watch that one again for cinematic purposes.
for sure.
I don't think I could watch Full Metal Jacket again. I was not entertained by Full Metal Jacket. I was educated.
There was a lot of very Kubrickian shots in this movie.
Right. So okay. So let's wrap up with these questions.
Yeah.
Okay. So would you guys recommend this movie?
I would recommend this movie to anybody considering enlisting in the military,
Okay.
especially any Christians considering enlisting.
Okay.
I would recommend the movie at least as a first time viewer. I don't think it's a movie that necessarily requires a rewatch.
Right.
But that's how I feel about most Kubrick movies.
Yeah.
I think he's overrated, like I said before.
Yeah.
So it's not entertaining to me, which is
Right.
the reason why I watch a movie.
Right.
But I think there are certain educational aspects that, like you said, for someone who might want to join the military, watch it, see if that's something that, from my perspective, see if it's something that you think you could handle.
Right.
I know you have a different perspective on why they should watch the movie.
That's right. It has nothing to do with handle. I'm convinced that anybody can handle this. I'm unconvinced that anybody should.
No, for me, like this felt more like a documentary or a
Docudrama.
right, like which, and for that reason, I'd say it's worth one watch. Whether you're considering military or not, like I would never consider myself a history buff, but like I enjoy learning about currently specifically American history. Like I've not ventured out past our borders on history I look to, but like I enjoy learning about history and stuff. And so for me, like again, it was a movie, but like there's aspects in it, like, and again through our conversation, like I'm intrigued in what was depicted as factual, what can I perceive as authentic depictions, or what was interpretations. But like that's what intrigues me, and that's the same. It's the same reason I watch documentaries. So like I wouldn't watch this again just because emotionally, like it was heavy. Whereas a documentary, they kind of keep it neutral and monotone, and it's easier to be not attached to a documentary. Like this movie I was attached to this movie. I was attached to Pyle. I had emotional investment in this movie, whereas documentaries, I'm more watching from afar, if that makes sense. So I wouldn't watch this one again just because like I was emotionally invested in this, but I think it's worth at least one watch. Just for academic and American history purposes, just to get a glimpse of what some people experienced. Biases and in political views aside, it's a glimpse of what people actually went through.
Yeah.
It's a glimpse, you know. Okay. I think we already talked about the next question. Would you guys change the rating? Absolutely not. Or like, there's
not only that, like I think it needed to be rated R.
Right. It's hard. It'd be hard to show
authentically.
Yeah. And it'd be PG-13 to get a glimpse of it. Yeah. It'd have to be rated R. They're minimal sexual, if we're talking about just the content for a second, violent, very violent, suicide depicted, murder depicted, warfare depicted. There's talks of prostitution. There's shown acts of prostitution, but there's no nudity.
There's a poster of a nude woman.
I didn't even catch that.
Yeah,
Okay.
They did film a sex scene with Joker and one of the prostitutes. And
Did they?
Kubrick cut it.
Well, that makes sense for Kubrick. Not the cutting part, but the filming of.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
That was for his own personal stash.
Yeah. It's for his director's cut,
personal collection.
But yeah, sexually, it's all implications. It's all dialogue.
Yeah.
But violence and language, it's definitely explicit and graphic, and depictions of just death. You know, corpses. You know, there's vomiting. There's stuff like that. It's like there's maliciousness. You know, so just stuff like that. So yeah, it definitely rated R.
Rated R for vomiting.
For vomiting, yeah, specifically vomiting.
That was the hardest part for me.
Puking.
I have a weak stomach.
All right. Last two questions here. Has it aged well?
I think it's
1987.
It's aged very well. It's not really a period piece because it wasn't too long after Vietnam War. That
20 years though.
It was 20. There's a 20-year gap.
No, I mean,
in filming production had advanced significantly in those 20 years.
What I mean is the movie was produced not long after the events took place, right? So it's not really a period piece.
Right.
I think despite that, it's aged very well.
There was nothing about this movie that I'm like, man, I wish they would redo this. Like, I would agree, it's aged well. It's kept its integrity.
I think some of the blood effects are pretty cheesy, but like Scorsese's done worse in modern movies.
Right.
So
right.
And Tarantino as well.
Yeah.
I'd agree.
Okay. All right. Last question here, and we'll wrap this up here. Would this be in your top 250?
I think so. I liked this a whole lot more than The Clockwork Orange.
100%.
And I think that there's a lot of value in this movie. I think it's a really interesting movie. I agree with Connor that the second half of the movie is less captivating than the first half, but I think that there's a lot of really interesting meat to this movie. And I mean, we talked for 3 hours, and I feel like scratched the surface. Like we could go on for another 3.
Yeah. With A Clockwork Orange, and I know we've bagged on that movie a lot in the last every episode.
Yeah,
there are substantial conversation topics in that movie that are worth talking about, that are worth discussing. There is some value in that movie. But for me, the way it was depicted is why I don't like it, because I feel like you can talk about those things, but depict them differently. With this movie, it's hard to talk about warfare. It's hard to talk about military. It's hard to talk about interceding with other countries and not show it the way it actually was portrayed. I wouldn't change anything with the way a movie was. That doesn't mean I was entertained by it. I was educated by it, but I wasn't entertained by it. Like to the point where like, oh yeah, it was a great movie. I loved it. It brought me joy. Like this movie did not bring me joy, but I learned something from it. I feel like this movie did everything correctly versus Clockwork Orange. I feel like you could bring up those conversations in a different way and not be sexually explicit and show the things that they showed. You can achieve those conversations in different ways. So Stanley won with this movie. I think he lost with Clockwork Orange. And I think this would make my top 250. I don't know if I'd watch it again, but it would be one that I would say, yeah, you should watch this. And it would be one I would talk about again in future conversations. Connor?
I think personally, this movie would not be in my top 250.
Okay.
Solely for the reason that I watch movies to be entertained.
Right.
And I wasn't entertained by this movie.
Right.
I think it's telling that the only part of this movie that people quote and that they remember is the first half with the boot camp scenes.
Not entirely correct.
Well, and is
People
this
quote the first prostitute a lot.
Okay.
and is this the movie
After that.
Is this the movie where the line "Only steers and queers come from Texas"?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, because I've
You
heard
don't
that.
look much like a cow.
I've
I
heard
will
that
say,
many places. I didn't know if this was the origin of it or if they were also reusing something. Okay,
yes
because
and
I'd
no.
heard that before.
So the guy playing the drill sergeant,
Yes.
he's drawing that from actual drill sergeant jokes.
Okay. So that
Well,
line
and actually, Arlie Ermy ad-libbed most of his scenes in that
I
That's
believe
right.
it.
that
I
first
believe
part
it,
of
yeah.
the movie, and it's like the only time that Kubrick has allowed somebody to ad-lib.
So that phrase predates the movie.
Yes, but the
steers
movie
and queers come from Texas.
popularized
Okay.
it for people
Okay.
outside the military.
Okay, because that's been reused before, and I was like,
For
oh,
sure.
and I did not know that's where this originated from.
Yeah.
Cinematically.
But yeah, no, for me personally, probably wouldn't be in my top 250. But I don't think that it's in value or that it doesn't have value.
Right.
Sure.
Right.
Right.
The metric of would you put this in your top 250 is it's almost useless because
Right.
like it means nothing.
And that's why we do it.
And that's why we do it.
That's why we do it. Yeah. It's
Connor, on a binary scale of best movie ever, worst movie ever,
3.4.
to be even broader.
to wrap up here, Connor, again, I know we said it recently, but I was so glad that you were able to come on and that
This was awesome.
you were willing to do a military movie with us. I hope to have you again on for another military movie or another movie of your choice. I know that you're going to be soon off to Colorado, so it's going to be a bit. But next time you're in town, I'd love to have you on again.
I'll definitely be back. Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, this is
a great episode.
This was incredible. Yeah.
If you measure our episodes by length, this is our greatest episode yet.
greatest episode.
I'll take that as a
This
compliment.
will probably be a
our
two-parter.
biggest feat.
I measure everything by length.
Yes.
And you
Nice.
come up wanting.
Oh man, this has been incredible. I've enjoyed this episode. It may or may not be a two-parter, and I'm going to be the one because I'm always the one, whether in this podcast or just in my life. But I am the cheesy guy that will say thank you, Connor, whether you want to hear it or not. Thank you for what you do, and just thank you for what you added to this podcast. Like this, your perspective is something we've not had yet in our short span of a podcast. But like it's valuable. I wish you great luck in your venture to Colorado and just in what you will be doing there. And I am grateful for what you do. Yeah. So that's all I have.
Well, thank
so
you.
Thank you. Yes.
Like I said, thanks for letting me come on here.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. In 2 weeks, we'll be back with Board Approval, a local band. We're going to go over the movie Jaws,
Ah, yes. The shark movie.
the shark movie. Got eyes like a dog's eyes. It's the only line I moved. Nothing for the
man.
movie. So, yes, join us in a couple weeks for Jaws. Thank you again, Connor.
Yes.
Look forward to having you again in the future.
And last but not least, we don't say this every episode, but if you enjoy this podcast, if we have any value to your ears, share us with someone. Let someone else know that you listen to us. We want to continue doing this, and we can only continue doing this by having listeners. That's what makes it worth it.
And we've said this several times with not a whole lot of engagement, but Jeff and I are available on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. If you have your own opinions of these movies, and we assume that you do, we want to hear them. You don't have to wait like Connor to be invited onto the show to
Right.
share your opinions on why we're wrong. You can tell us why we're wrong right now.
We want to be the start of a discussion. We don't want
That's
it
right.
to end with this episode ending. We want to spark people being inquisitive about what they're watching, what they're putting before their eyes and in their mind. So
That's right. And since I let Jeff have the last word on a handful of things, if you are also an anarcho-capitalist, please chime in to tell Jeff why he's wrong.
yes, please, I need you.
All right. That's it for us. Thank you so much. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
Thanks for listening. We had a great time putting this together for you.
To join the conversation, find us on Facebook and Instagram at Silver Screen Biases.
And on Twitter at Screen Biases.
We believe in value for value, so if you found value in our show, we ask you to consider supporting us.
Links to our social media and support can be found in the show notes.